just said when they weren't hot. What is up, everyone? It is Saturday. You got 2 hours to lock, and we got ourselves a Saturday deeper dive. We'll take you through the day's 5-game slate. Going to have a lot of Grizzlies chatter on this one, but many things to hit on over the course of the next hour before E. McIntyre taking a live before lock. But I am Chris Spags, joined by a man who is always with me on these Saturday journeys, a man who's fearless in the face of Twitter trolls. He's Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, and fearless is one way to put it, but I know we were talking a little bit before about potentially being fatigued by Twitter trolls. I am not fatigued of it yet, but also I just learned, somebody told me that you could mute certain conversations on Twitter. You could mute threads. So that's big for me, because the one thing is I'll take on all comers on twitter.com. However, it does get a little annoying when all of a sudden that becomes like 8 other different arguments and I'm just tagged in a million different things and it eats all my notifications. I just found out you can mute all of that. So now I'm free reign to go attack trolls. I could mute them individually. I can mute the thread or whatever. So then they just yell into the abyss about how unhappy they are about me, how much they don't like me. And it doesn't matter. I don't even see it.
So, Greg, the dirty Harry of Twitter. So go ahead, make his day. Tweet him something mean at GEhrenbergDFS. Follow me at Chris Spags as well, and follow at Awesemo_com, where there is great content coming through. Today alone, we've had 4 different sports on the channel. We've had MMA, NASCAR, NHL, now NBA back again. So make sure you're following everything here, and of course, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button on the video. All that stuff's helped us out a bunch with getting seen by more people and making sure that we feel good about ourselves to give you guys the best information that we can. And speaking of the good information, the good news really every single day is playing on Superdraft. They bring you this show. The deeper dive on the weekends wouldn't exist without Superdraft. And it's also really been a fantastic site to play on if you are a new player or a player who's been playing for years. Guys like Rinpack, who's so sharp, does fantastically on Superdraft. A lot of new players too. There was one guy who chatted in the other day who they got one of our free tickets during the YouTube giveaways and ended up turning that into $100 within a few days. That's what Superdraft has going, because they have gigantic tournaments up top today. They have a 40K jump shot with 6,500 going to first place. And that tournament recently has had a lot of overlay in it, at least decreased rake for the most part, because they're putting bigger tournaments out there to try to get people in, trying to put out these big prize pools. That's a Superdraft difference. So go over to superdraft.io, download Superdraft in the App Store, and use the promo code Awesemo21 when you sign up, because they will give you $50 free on your deposit of $50 or more. So go to superdraft.io or download it in the App Store today. Superdraft, no limits, more winning. Greg, let's talk about this slate real fast and give a general overview for me here, because I think there's going to be one theme that I mentioned up top, the Memphis Grizzlies, that is going to greatly inform everything we talk about today. Is there anything that sort of struck you as interesting or unique about this 5-game slate that Alex and Adam were talking earlier? I think it's a fun one, and I'm kind of inclined to agree. I feel like the games here, quality, I feel like we have value. It seems like a nice mix of things and not too many games to overload you.
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to give my general review, I could end this entire show in 30 seconds, which is Memphis, whoever starts, those are the primary value plays, and then you just pay up for LeBron James, Damian Lillard, mix in Steph Curry, some of the other high-priced options, stars and scrubs. Bada bing, bada boom. That's the entire slate. That's all the content you need for the day. That's it. That's
all right,
it.
Done.
That's
Deeper dive over. Let's turn it over to live before live. But I think I'm on the same page with you. The value looks pretty good, or at least, looks like there is a logic to it. Memphis is the ones to look at today. And if you've never heard the name John Conchar, prepare to get ready to hear that over and over again. It is not a character in Lord of the Flies. It is, in fact, an NBA player who you can hear and see on all the Awesemo data today. And of course, go over to awesemo.com/join for yourself. Check out all the ownership projections, player projections, and the boom bust tool that our pal Terry was talking about. Great length today on the game plan, how he uses it in his building lineups. It's a lot of great information for you, whether you're an Express consumer or a customer, rather, somebody paying for the cheaper packages there where you get the rankings form of things. You get the premium Slack with that too. There's just a lot of ways to get better. So check out all the packages we have at awesemo.com/join. First game on the slate. Let's get into it. We got Golden State heading into Charlotte. 117.8 implied total for Golden State, 115.8 for Charlotte. Greg, historically, this has been a spot for Steph Curry, a return to his dad's former stomping grounds, his own college stomping grounds too, and Greg's former stomping grounds. So that's probably also a motivator for him. Josh Chu, he probably wants to go there, show Josh what's what. But Steph today, priced over 10K again. He's had some big upside days, including yesterday. So how are you handling Steph here on a slate where you do have LeBron, you do have Damian Lillard, and I think both guys on projection basis probably do look like better plays to a lot of people?
Yeah, so here's the thing, though. The ownership between the three is not all that different. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Damian Lillard, all projected in the 20% range for ownership. So it's not like one of these guys that's on DraftKings. FanDuel is a little different, but it's not like these guys on DraftKings were looking at some sort of massive pivot or low-owned guy. They're all fairly similar in ownership. They're separated by 5% each. So whichever ones you prefer, you just go play and you don't worry about the ownership. For me, I have the most exposure to Damian Lillard 1, LeBron 2, and Steph Curry 3. And once again, it's a very similar situation that we've had with Steph Curry with a lot of slates where there's other stars I prefer. The difference is here, though, there is so much value on the slate at this point that it's not hard to get exposure to all three. Not that you could fit all three of them in the same lineup. I don't think I did that anywhere. Although maybe if one more player gets ruled out, then it will be easy to do that. But I mean, as of right now, I assume I have at least two of them in all of my lineups on DraftKings, and then probably about the same on FanDuel too. The difference on FanDuel with Lillard versus Curry is right now we have Curry project for 22% ownership compared to 36% for Lillard. So there's a little bit of a gap there, but still there isn't some situation where one of these guys is 5% owned and somebody's 40% owned. All of them are somewhat popular.
Now, I think we're on the same page with this one, too. Lillard is also my preferred play on the day. LeBron, actually, I have LeBron number 3. I have Steph number 2, but the difference between Steph's ownership for me and LeBron right now is going to be pretty negligible. I think Steph is very much in the mix, and we see it. I think certainly some risk here or some cause for concern that he hasn't been assisting as well. It's something I've talked about a lot recently where Draymond Green takes some of his assists away off the table that Steph's been getting, or at least was getting in games without Draymond, but still scoring upside's been huge. The usage rate for him, I think, has started to bounce back a little after he was deferring some to Draymond, letting him kind of pick and choose his spots a bit more over the last 2 weeks. It seemed like Steph is back to his season long rates, which I think is going to happen when you have a lot of moving pieces in an offense. But I agree. I think Steph in this spot looks fantastic. And, it's sort of hard to nickel and dime these guys, but if Steph ends up lower owned, I think it's very logical here to try to bump him up above LeBron or Dame, or maybe even just get him in the mix a bit more here. But I agree, getting those three guys today is going to be probably a core lineup building block. And Greg, another guy for me that's a core building block is going to be Draymond Green, who has already been announced. He is playing today, so hopefully don't have to deal with the mystery around all that. And Draymond without Kevon Looney, without James Wiseman, he's been a monster overall. The assist rate's been good. The rebounds have been there. Some defensive stats also trickling up as he's playing more center. And Draymond at a price that I think opens up a lot of things in terms of the overall lineup construction. So he is a guy that I'll be heavy on once again, though not as heavy as some other days, but less than 2x the field. But how are you feeling about him, Greg, in this spot where he's going to be 20% as shown? It's a 5-gamer, and the usage isn't there enough where you can always bank on that necessarily.
So he's a much stronger play for me on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. On FanDuel, he's 7,600, so that's a lot different than his 6,600 price tag on DraftKings. Something else I think we should talk about, just because, we've got some time to kill, an hour to talk about only 5 games. Draymond Green is having one of the all-time weird line seasons. Like, who puts up stat lines that are like this? Draymond Green, like, his normal stat line's like 5 points, 5 rebounds, like 14 assists. Like, he's putting up some of the strangest stat lines. The defensive stats have been a little bit better for him as of late. Compared to the beginning of the season where he wasn't getting any of them. But they're still not significant compared to what he used to get on the defensive end. So that's one of the other reasons that he makes for a better play on DraftKings than FanDuel, is because the turnovers become less of an issue on DraftKings. And then also he doesn't get the big defensive stat boost on FanDuel. And then that also combined with the $1,000 difference in price. But some of these recent lines for Draymond Green: 6 points, 8 rebounds, 16 assists. 8 points, 6 rebounds, 11 assists. He has a game with 2 points, 6 rebounds, 15 assists, 6 steals, and 4 blocks. Like, what are these lines? Nobody else has ever done this that I can remember seeing, but it's something I think we can kind of expect from him, at least for now, when there are no other centers on the team. He's just playing center. He only plays center on defense, basically. On offense, he's essentially the point guard.
Right.
So I think what we've seen from Draymond Green, it makes him a good play on DraftKings. Other players, I have a little bit of interest in Wiggins on FanDuel, but no real exposure of significance to any other players on the Warriors.
Also, we got news while we were talking. It's not related to today's slate, but DeMarcus Cousins apparently parting ways with the Rockets, which I guess Christian Wood must be coming back soon, but kind of a surprise there. He's definitely not been the best fit in that team, but fantasy wise, he's had some better days than not. But who's picking up DeMarcus at this point? I guess maybe he might be a Brooklyn guy.
Here's what's also really weird. Didn't they guarantee his contract for the rest of the season 2 days ago?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's also really weird.
Maybe he had a little tantrum in the locker room. Maybe he's got some Twitter trolls that got to him, and then it just was too much. But yeah, that's a bit of a surprise there. But I guess Wood must be back eminently, I would think, or just there's something catastrophic that's happened in the interim. Weird one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look to see if I see any other news about it on Twitter. That's so weird and unexpected. I mean, when Christian Wood's healthy, he doesn't really have a role on that team. I mean, we're seeing him play, like 12, 15 minutes, stuff like that. But still, I mean, he's playing healthy minutes right now with Christian Wood out, and at least from what I've seen, there is no imminent return coming for Christian Wood. I don't know what the hell the Rockets are doing now anyway. They've been resting, John Wall a ton. They've been holding Victor Oladipo out for a while, and he also hasn't been playing in back-to-back. So this is a team a couple weeks ago I thought kind of had sneaky playoff potential, but it doesn't seem like that's something they're going for at this point in time.
Yeah, so interesting one to keep an eye on for. And the Rockets have been out of action recently with some of the weather troubles in Texas. So hopefully anybody watching this one, I presume you guys are making out okay. But our producer Tyler's in Texas. We support Texas. So, hope everybody out there is doing all right. And hang in there if you're not. And if you're somehow listening to this and you're not doing okay, then more power to you. I guess you're like, I got to get my lineups in. I got to hear these guys.
Pun intended, more power to you.
Oh, that was actually, I guess, ill-advised then. Now I could get canceled for trying to be nice to people.
Yeah, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
That's classic me. The rest of the Warriors, you mentioned overall your impact on these guys, but one thing jumping out to me, Andrew Wiggins projected for 20% ownership on DraftKings. He is a player that I've chronicled my battle trying to make sure he doesn't get into lineups for me as much as possible. And, there are some reasons to go his way. I think one of our premium Slack guys, might have been Sazcrit, but somebody pointed it out recently that Wiggins is now in the second unit for the most part, getting some extra usage away from the starting group, which is something that previously has helped Kelly Oubre find his form a little bit more. And that's one thing I guess that maybe gives a little bit of a boost to Wiggins, but the rates to me, he's been rebounding and assisting at a lower rate since Draymond's been back. Overall, the usage to me, I feel like is fine, but it's not anything that's going to knock your socks off by any stretch. Is Wiggins to you worth the 20%? Are you willing to be there on a day where we have a chalk Wiggins, even though there's so many places you can go?
Only on Fanduel, and it's really just because of positional scarcity. So on Fanduel, also, his defensive stats have been pretty good this year, so that makes him a little more viable on Fanduel. He doesn't have much of a ceiling at this point. Like, he's been really consistent around, like 28 to 30 fantasy points. But on a slate where it's small and there aren't a whole lot of options, I kind of think that the floor becomes more valuable in some situations than the ceiling. Because if guys like LeBron, Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, if they're going to go off, then I don't think it's all that likely we see somebody like Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal end up in the optimal lineup. And that's where it could become a little more valuable to save money at shooting guard. So I think that, getting exposure to Wiggins on FanDuel at a 6,400 price tag where, some of the guys priced around him, like Terry Rozier is the next price guy, and he's at 7,000, so $600 more expensive than if you go a little cheaper. Tyler Hero is 6,300, Buddy Hield is 6,000. I have Wiggins projected quite a bit better than those guys. So I think just for the price range he's in, he's a much better option than the guys around him. So that's one of the other reasons I'm getting to Wiggins on FanDuel also, but not on DraftKings for me.
I think I'd prefer Oubre on DraftKings. And Greg, to close the loop here on Golden State before we move on to the Charlotte side of the equation, which does have some injuries to talk about, Oubre or Wiggins, if you had to choose on DraftKings, which one would you prefer?
Oubre.
Yeah, it's me. Same for me. And Oubre right now projects for less ownership. We'll see if that changes around here. As always, the ownership projections do get an update as we go. But that's something that for me, I'd rather have Oubre. And I'm only with the field on Oubre. I'm not really planning on slamming these guys into lineups besides, I guess, Draymond and Steph. Charlotte's side, we have no Devontae Graham today. He's been ruled out already. We do have one of the Martins, I think, at least getting back, maybe two, but that might not matter that much. The chalk in this game seems to be going largely towards Gordon Hayward, going towards LaMelo Ball. And Greg, those guys are ones that I like a lot here. I'm going to be heavy on both. Hayward in particular, I just don't get the price tag on him. The projection that Awesemo has on him is just shy of 40 DK points. At his salary, that looks really solid here. And going against Golden State, defensively, they've made some strides. They're up to a 106.9 defensive efficiency rating, which isn't bad. But they play fast, and Hayward's got about a 26% usage rate in court time without Devontae Graham. Feel good about Hayward here and Ball for all the same reasons that we know. Just a fantastic per minute producer who the team is getting more comfortable with. But is there any reason you would see, Greg, to move away from these two guys?
I wouldn't say move away, but the 8,800 price tag on LaMelo is pretty pricey on DraftKings. It doesn't take him out of play for me, but there's a big difference between him on FanDuel and DraftKings, where on FanDuel, LaMelo is only 7,800. And he is going to be one of the most popular point guards on FanDuel. I think in cash games, you want to prioritize trying to make a lineup with Damian Lillard and LaMelo Ball based on their upside and ownership and where their prices are at. So LaMelo Ball, to me, points per dollar, he's neck and neck with Damian Lillard as my favorite play at point guard on FanDuel. DraftKings, I'm getting exposure to him, but not nearly at the same rate that I am on FanDuel. And it's a lot of to the price point where you don't have to spend all that much more to get up to, like LeBron James, Damian Lillard. And I don't think the salary savings do all that much for us on a slate where there's so much value already. So I don't think there's a massive need to roster LaMelo at 8,800 on DraftKings. My current exposure to him in the lineups that I've run, which, I mean, we've got an hour and a half until lock, so stuff can change for them, but I have him at 10% on DK right now.
Okay, I've got him at 28%, and I feel like the ownership level that we have for him on our current run of projections, which again can move around a little bit, just under 20%. So to me, I just wanted to get a taste more of LaMelo. But I agree, the price tag does seem kind of gross. But if you look at the actual projection and look at his performance, he's been a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy for the most part. You could assume that he gets just a little bit of a boost without having Devontae Graham out there. I think too, honestly, the fact that we should see PJ Washington, starting after last game when Devontae Graham went out, Malik Monk came in. I don't think Monk is the best to have a lot alongside Ball that often, even though they're going to get some minutes together, just the way it goes. But having Washington out there, that's a guy that LaMelo is going to set up a bit more. So I don't know. That's not something that's going to matter that much, but just trying to make the case a little bit. On the same token, I don't like PJ Washington that much at all. He's going to be pretty decently owned on DraftKings today. I think on FanDuel, maybe there's a better argument for him, but how are you feeling about PJ Washington given the fact that he actually projects for slightly more ownership right now than LaMelo Ball?
I'm about even with the field on him on FanDuel, and to the point also about him on FanDuel, he's currently projected to be the second most popular power forward. We have Xavier Tillman number 1 and PJ Washington number 2, only 5,600 on FanDuel. Also, I think that there's so many spend up options at other positions, and power forward is one that doesn't really have them. The two most expensive power forwards are Bam Adebayo and Draymond Green. So I think that he's a decent play for his price. I'm not over or underweight to field. It looks like I'm going to be right around even with him as long as the ownership doesn't change dramatically. For his DraftKings price, I didn't get to him in my initial builds. And it's another situation where when somebody is in that mid-tier price range on this particular slate, I'm just not going to get to them all that much. All my lineups are going to trend towards being stars and scrubs on DraftKings. There's so much positional flexibility where you could just you generally play whoever are the best points per dollar plays. There aren't some, real stringent lineup issues like we have on FanDuel where we have to roster 2 power forwards, have to roster 2 shooting guards and stuff like that. So the price tag on PJ Washington, which I think is relatively fair, really it's fair on both sides. It's just on FanDuel, we have to roster 2 power forwards, and there isn't obvious value of power forward other than Xavier Tillman on FanDuel. So PJ Washington, where the price tag is just kind of fair, we don't need to target guys who have fair price tags on this kind of slate. There's so much value.
Kevin Miller in the YouTube chat saying, super hope they don't talk about Rozier while Spags plays 30% ball. First of all, take that, Rozier. Second of all, the main thing with Rozier, at least on a rate level basis, when you're looking at the numbers on NBA Wowie or whatever on-off comparison tools you look at, Rozier's biggest boost has come from not having Hayward on the floor, from not having PJ Washington on the floor. For whatever reason, that doesn't have the same effect when Devontae Graham is out. I think that's because Devontae Graham is more of a playmaker, more of a setup guy, more of an open 3-point shooter. And Terry can knock down, those open look threes. He's shown that a little bit more this year. He's shooting, is this number right? He's shooting 50% from 3 on the year, but apparently shooting, oh no, that's my bad. That's how often he's shooting threes. He's shooting 45% from 3, which is still a number better than I would have guessed, but it's just not the same game. So I don't think Rozier is that sneaky here. I think if anything, he's priced up for some games that were mostly outliers. But Greg, do you disagree here? Do you feel like Rozier has value at a price on DraftKings at 7,900? Just seems to me like far more untenable than LaMelo's price.
All right, so think about some of the guys who are priced around Terry Rozier. You could roster Ja Morant for $200 less. You could pay up $100 more and get to De'Aaron Fox. You could pay up $100 more and get to Devin Booker. I don't like Devin Booker on this slate, but who's a better basketball player, Devin Booker or Terry Rozier? Who's a better basketball player, Ja Morant or Terry Rozier? Who's a better basketball player, De'Aaron Fox or Terry Rozier? And not only are these guys better, but they're all much better fantasy producers too. So it's just the price point is not a favorable one for him at all on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's a little bit more reasonable at 7,000. I have at least minimal exposure to him there, but I literally have 0 right now of him on DraftKings, and I have no issue with that at that price point.
Yeah, I think the best case you can make for Rozier is that for tournament play, if you're not playing Hayward or Ball or both, the way that those guys probably fail is Rozier getting hot, which he has done recently. But I think just on the overall season-long picture, the tapestry that we have looking at these guys, like I don't see Rozier being there, and the price being that high definitely doesn't make it easy to get there. If he's like a 6, $6K pivot or a $6,500 pivot, I think you can go like, yeah, Rozier's got a little more viable case, but now you're taking a pretty big leap of faith to get there. And maybe it pays off because the field's going to be so heavily on Ball and Hayward and nobody's going to be on Rozier because nobody wants to pay that price tag. But as Greg said, I think there are probably better ways to go. Anybody else for Charlotte for you, Greg? I feel like we've covered most of the main guys. Miles Bridges is going to pick up some ownership. He seems fine. I don't really have a strong feel there. I'll probably be with the field, but Cody Zeller, anybody else for you?
Not really. I have like a couple of Cody Zeller lineups on FanDuel just because he's 5,100 and it's hard to find a cheap center to really like on FanDuel, but not somebody I really like. He's just somebody who's in a few of my lineups at this point, just by the nature of, hey, I built lineups and this is how much money was left at the center position. So there goes Cody Zeller in the lineup. Other guys, though, nobody else I have exposure to. I didn't talk about Gordon Hayward, but I agree with everything you said. He's one of my favorite plays overall on the slate.
Yep. So we're on the same page for the most part here. And again, guys, hit the like button. Help us get the likes up a bunch here so Terry and Emac can come in and feel good about themselves and maybe even give you guys a top 5 owned plays for DraftKings and FanDuel if you get a good amount of likes in. So smash that like button now. Help us support A, ourselves, and B, just support the channel because it makes us feel good about ourselves. Keep the positive energy going. Next game up here, we got Miami getting 102.5 implied points. The Lakers getting 105.5 implied points. And as a result, this total here, extremely low, 208 implied total, which, who knows if they can somehow rise above that level, but we're talking, basically 2015 basketball over under in this game. And as a result, I don't see a lot of love for much here, Greg. I feel like Jimmy Butler is still in play for me on Miami side. Kendrick Nunn, single digit ownership. I think has some value on his price with Goran Dragic still out. He's okay. I'll never really have an issue getting to Bam, even though Bam for the most part doesn't project terribly well for me. Is there anything on the side for Miami, Greg, that you're particularly interested in?
No, nothing at all. I think this is the least appealing team on the entire slate. Jimmy Butler, I thought earlier in the day I could get to him a little bit on FanDuel, but then I started building lineups, and he's 9,200. LeBron is 10,500. And then, like I said before, when you're considering all the value that's on this slate, it wasn't that hard to find the $1,300 extra dollars to get from Jimmy Butler to LeBron James. So I'm not getting to Jimmy Butler on FanDuel, and then I'm not getting to Bam Adebayo on FanDuel or DraftKings either because I think he's a little bit overpriced. And on center eligible on DraftKings, there's a bunch of other centers that I like instead of him. So when I have so many other guys that I prioritize getting exposure to over Bam Adebayo, Jonas Valanciunas, Enes Kanter, we talked about Draymond Green. He's multiple positional eligibility, but still want to get exposure to him. And it was hard for me to fit in Bam Adebayo. There's just so many other players that I like more than him on DraftKings at that position. And then also, to the point about value, we have these guys who I'd consider to be, second tier fantasy stars. And it's not that hard to get up to the first tier stars on the slate in Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Damian Lillard. So the few $100s of salary savings, it didn't do a whole lot for me.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I still think Butler looks okay, but most of his upside's been priced out where now you're paying in the hopes that he has, a ceiling game. And I think that's fine because Butler's shown, a 55 fantasy point upside more often than not with Goran Dragic out recently. And actually, been steadily in that level. It's not even like we're talking a ceiling here. Besides that, though, like, I agree. Like, I think the price is high enough where I want to get some of him. I think he's viable to get into the mix, and Bam, I think you make the same case for, even though I personally do favor Jimmy Butler more often over Bam. But I feel like I'm with you. I think it's a tough spot to get to, and you're sort of, just really doing it, I think, to get different in some amount of lineups when you're playing, 50, 150, whatever the case may be. So to me, that's sort of the reason to get to Butler, and everything else not that pretty. The Lakers side, though, Greg, I think we have one guy who's going to be a priority play on the slate, at least for a lot of people out there, LeBron James. We're going to have no Dennis Schroeder. He's out for health protocols. Also no Anthony Davis. He remains out with his Achilles issues. And LeBron, rates wise, everything looks pretty good. The usage for him should be in the range of 35-ish%. If you look at the season-long numbers without Schroeder and without Anthony Davis, the assist rate too, about 42%, all good things here. But I think the down total for me is going to make LeBron fall behind guys like Lillard and Steph Curry we talked about earlier. Everything's going to go through LeBron, Greg, so I think there's still a case to be made. But how do you feel about him in this spot where it is a very low total against the Heat defense that's not as good as last year, but still fairly competent across the board?
Yeah, I like LeBron a lot. Like I said before, he's my second favorite pay-up option on the slate. Damian Lillard, number 1, LeBron 2. I think if you want to roster Steph Curry over LeBron, I don't have an issue with that. Personally, I'm going with more exposure to LeBron than Steph Curry, but I'm getting both of them into lineups. On FanDuel, I think he's by far the best small forward option at 10,500. Once again, like I've said about pretty much everybody else, it's easy to get to him. LeBron and Gordon Hayward, those are my two favorite small forwards on FanDuel. And then as for the other guys on the Lakers, I'm finding it really difficult to project minutes because last game we had no Dennis Schroeder, we had no Anthony Davis. That's going to be the case again. But during that game, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope briefly left because of an injury. Wesley Matthews briefly left because of an injury. And then the game was also a blowout, so the starters came out with about 4 minutes left in the game. So you consider all those factors. Like Taylor Horton-Tucker played 28 minutes last game. But I have no sense for how much he would have played had KCP not got hurt during the game, had Wesley Matthews not got hurt during the game. Both those guys had to go to the locker room briefly. So that gave him a couple extra minutes. And I don't think he's going to get to 28 again. But if he gets to, say, 26, then he makes for a pretty good value play. And given what his ownership is compared to some of the Grizzlies guys, especially on Fanduel, I want to get some of him, but I'm not sure if I'm projecting his minutes properly. I gave him 25 minutes for right now, and that makes him look pretty good. Not quite as good as the Grizzlies guys. However, it's comparable enough to where Taylor Horton-Tucker, for example, 5% projected ownership on Fanduel. And then we have Desmond Bane coming in around 20%, and actually John Concher only 10% right now. But if that's going to hold true through the rest of the slate where Taylor Horton-Tucker's 5% owned and Desmond Bane's 20% owned, then I'm going to want to have a little bit more exposure to Tucker than I have to Bane, as long as that's what the ownership is, because I don't have them projected all that differently. But the one thing I said that is a little bit of a holdup for me is I'm just not sure what to expect for his playing time after there was so many weird variables that went into the Lakers last game. So maybe you feel a little bit better about it than me. Do you have any like real strong takes or any real confidence in how much Taylor Horton-Tucker plays? His minutes have already been all over the place as it is for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the one thing that you have going for him is that, and it's actually, I think, a worse thing that Caruso isn't starting, because I think then you see Taylor Horton-Tucker get that second unit ball handling time that's been really beneficial for him, both in the preseason and some of the stints where you've seen it happen here, where when there isn't a point guard, you see Horton-Tucker, who's not a fantastic assist guy, but can, drive the lane, can start to set guys up, does a little bit of everything, and I think that's where it starts to add up. But I agree, he should be in the mix. Like, he should be, for me, he's going to be about 15% relative to the ownership we have on DraftKings right now. For Horton-Tucker, we have 13.5% expected ownership for him on DraftKings. For Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, we have 18% expected for him. So that's, 10%. That was my bad. I would rather have Caldwell-Pope, I think, because he's projected by Awesemo to play 31 minutes compared to 23 for Horton-Tucker. But I think these guys are just ones that mix in lineups where you have, maybe only 2 Grizzlies value guys or 1 Grizzly value guy, or maybe you're fading them in the lineup. Like, to me, I think that's their value, is just, leveraging off of the Grizzlies ownership. But they're not unowned entirely. Like, they're not single digit guys. So I don't feel the need to force them that much. If I get there, great. And I think right now I'm getting there. And if it changes around, if these guys get more ownership as we go, I could see getting less. I think it's all going to come down to that next run that we have.
Yeah, and then the other guy, you mentioned him, Alex Caruso, and he didn't start last game. I thought he was going to start. Then he didn't start. There was a whole situation where who's a better play, Alex Caruso, Corey Joseph, Alex Caruso. Then neither of them are starting, and neither of them looked like great plays. And then they ended up scoring like the exact same amount of fantasy points. So it was a lot of thinking about which to play for really something that didn't matter at all. They had, I think there was like a 1 fantasy point difference between them when they were both a little bit popular on the last slate. So something else, Alex Caruso, even though he came off the bench, he played 26 minutes last game, and he also came out because of the blowout. But he had also played a pretty long stretch in the third quarter into the fourth quarter before he came out. So I don't know if the intention was for Alex Caruso to close the game or not, because we haven't seen games without Dennis Schroeder this year. And then, like I said, also the game was a blowout, and he had came out after a long stretch. So I don't know if he would have come back in to play the last couple minutes. But 26 minutes for Alex Caruso last game, if he would have closed the game and ended up playing, like 28 or 29 minutes, I think that's a decent amount of upside for Alex Caruso as a guy who's a potential value play that isn't really getting ownership. So that's right now what I'm going to be looking at, is if we go into lock with no real significant ownership on Taylor Horton-Tucker or Alex Caruso, those are guys that I'll want to get at least a little bit of exposure to on FanDuel and DraftKings, probably slightly more than the field gets.
One thing too that I'm observing here, which I didn't catch in my first run, but it's and this is kind of just an extra data point, not one that I think you should be loading up on KCP for by any stretch. But there is a lot more assisted threes, more than league average, that Miami gives up, and they also give up a lot more corner 3 looks, about 21% more than league average, and that's KCP's primary shot. He's shooting 52% of his attempts from the corner. So to me, that's one little sliver of hope to give to KCP here, is that it's going to be a tough defense. Setting up a corner 3 is probably one of the better looks the Lakers will will get. And I think to me that's enough to justify the KCP amount, though that could also just be doing some mental gymnastics, Greg, to try to get to the guys that we find viable.
Yeah, I mean that's how narratives work, right?
Sure.
We generally will find a play we like for whatever reason. We just gravitate towards them. We like the player. We think they're fun to watch, and then we find out the reasons we like them afterwards. So that, I mean, I don't know if that applies to KCP for anybody though.
It's been one thing in the past where that was actually one reason I'd played KCP earlier in the year, was I was like, oh, he actually does shoot a lot and it matches up well. And KCP is a guy who just, the usage rate's not that high, but has a chance to get a little bit higher. So that's one little feather in his cap I would give that doesn't make me feel terrible about having him a little bit above the field. One guy we should just touch on real fast, because he's going to be 2% projected ownership, and he does have some theoretical upside, even though we don't see it very much. But Kyle Kuzma here on DraftKings, the price looks bad. The projection looks bad. Alex has him at 27.3 points. I have him for 27.5, which puts him at about a 4.1x value. So it's not a guy who's going to pop up in any optimizer for you, but he does exist on the court, Greg. It's a matchup here where you got to assume Miami's going to send guys after LeBron. Maybe he does set up Kuzma well. And Kuzma, one thing about him is his usage rate is higher with LeBron on the floor because of the assists that LeBron is setting up for him. I could see the logic behind Kuzma at his DraftKings price. I don't want to be there at all, but I just feel like we have to mention him because he's been a beneficiary in the past of no AD, and we just haven't seen much of an upside lately.
Yeah, so he's made 8 starts so far this season. He averages 26.8 DraftKings points in those starts. His high watermark was a 35 fantasy point game earlier in the season against the Timberwolves, but he had a 39 fantasy point game against the Pistons in the start against them. But in general, he's been really consistent, scoring like 28 to 35 fantasy points in his starts. Somebody I have a minor amount of interest in on Fanduel, but not on DraftKings at his price point. Fanduel where he's 5,900, and the power forward options kind of suck outside of Xavier Tillman. That's why I get to Kyle Kuzma a little bit, but I think the price tag is fair. I don't look at it as some sort of massive value or anything. And the pace of play, to what you mentioned before, that's a little bit of a concern for me with Kyle Kuzma. It isn't for LeBron. Like, LeBron's gonna get his fantasy points no matter what. You look at that lineup now, and just the ball has to be in LeBron's hands, especially because they're not starting Alex Caruso. So it's just LeBron is the only creator on the offense. And then he's playing extra minutes also because there's no Anthony Davis or Dennis Schroeder there. So I think that LeBron shouldn't be impacted too much by the pace of play, but I do worry about it a little bit with somebody like Kuzma, and there's less possessions for him.
I think that makes sense. All right, guys, smash the like button here. We're at the halfway point of the show, which on the Live Before Lock show would be called Money Time, but here on the Deeper Dive, it's just the halfway point of the show. So that's a boo to that, I guess. But you still get at the cash register here. And honestly, by the time I'll flip the hat for the money game, which is not this next one coming up, but we all know which one it's going to be. It's going to be Memphis. So I'll give you guys a hat flip. There were some actually people requesting the hat flip earlier, Greg, which makes me feel good, is that, because that's part of the bit I bring to the table. Anybody could be like, oh, it's the most profitable time in DFS, but the hat flipping, nobody can quite capture that as well as I do.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't give out the winning information, at least you got other stuff going on.
you don't give them more fodder to be mean, boys. In the chat. Next game up, Sacramento 118.8 implied points, Chicago 116.8 implied points. A game that maybe in other seasons wouldn't look like the fantasy utopia that it may be tonight. And let's talk Sacramento first, because Greg, I like a lot of guys on Sacramento and can somehow afford to get the amount of Curry exposure I'm expecting to get, the amount of Lillard exposure, LeBron exposure. And De'Aaron Fox still, to me, a guy that I can get above the field on. He looks like a really solid play going against Chicago, whose defense is starting to show some signs of life with Wendell Carter. Not a crazy amount by any stretch. And I think they're still just the middle of the pack, probably still the lower half of the league in terms of defense. But I think it's worth noting that I keep seeing their defensive efficiency rating drop, and I think that's probably a good sign for them overall. But still, this game against Chicago, fast pace. Fox usage rate for him is tremendous, 30% on the year, assist rate over 33%. To me, Fox is appropriately owned, but I still want to get more than him. How do you feel about his prospects here going against Chicago?
Yeah, I like De'Aaron Fox a lot, and he's had a couple of bad games in a row, and that's caused his price to go down fairly significantly on both FanDuel and DraftKings, because he was somebody who was at 9,000 just about a week ago, and now he has a couple of bad games, and he's right back to around 8,000. So I like him a lot on FanDuel and DraftKings. The other thing to consider here as well is the Kings are dealing with a bunch of injuries. So Harrison Barnes' list is questionable. Rashawn Holmes is questionable. Glenn Robinson III is questionable. The Glenn Robinson III one obviously isn't as significant. However, if Harrison Barnes is out, we've seen Glenn Robinson start in his place. So that's a lot of playing time and usage that would open up in the Kings starting lineup, particularly if Harrison Barnes is out. So I think that's all the more reason to like De'Aaron Fox with his price point down. Like you said, high pace matchup, favorable matchup against the Bulls. The Bulls are fourth in the league in pace right now, below average in defensive efficiency, and they've been like bottom 8 over the last month in defensive efficiency. So De'Aaron Fox is definitely the primary play for me on the Kings. And as for other guys, I just have to see what happens with the injuries, because I think there's going to be other guys in play. I just don't know who they are until these guys start to get either ruled in or ruled out. I'm going to ask you, what do you make of Hassan Whiteside if Rashawn Holmes is out? Because he's somebody that I think as a contrarian option could be good to go back to. He was almost 70% owned in some contests on Draftkings when he had that chalk slate the other day, when it was Hassan Whiteside chalk slate. And he didn't end up starting. I don't think he would start in this game either, because he didn't start last time. But we've still seen that if he's playing well, like the game against the Nets, they'll just leave Hassan Whiteside out there, play big minutes. If he's not playing well, or if they're down, like what happened in their last game, then they won't play him much in the second half. But just because he has the same kind of upside, I'd be willing to go back to him, assuming that Rashawn Holmes is out. If Rashawn Holmes is in, then there's no reason to roster Whiteside.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I wouldn't get him right now. Like with 16 minutes that Alex has for him, assuming that Holmes plays 27, like he doesn't pop up for me at all, doesn't even get close to it. But I would think, if Holmes is out and there's at least a chance of him playing minutes, I don't want to be as heavy as I was at other slate, because I think there was an assumption that he'd play a little bit more minutes than he actually did coming off the bench. And he certainly didn't get hot. Revenge game. There's one spot, if anybody wants to point to, the revenge game did not quite work out for Hassan Whiteside in that spot. But I think here, I don't mind getting to him if we have Holmes out. And even if he doesn't start, like Greg was saying, I think he can heat up off the bench. But right now, I'm not planning to be there at all until we get this news here. And it is important to watch here. We don't know anything yet about Barnes and Holmes, but they're going to open up some minutes. Bielitsa becomes more of a play, though. He's also been priced up enough on DraftKings where he's not really a value. I guess, Greg, in terms of the contingencies here, you mentioned that Glenn Robinson could start if Barnes is out. What guys immediately take a jump up for you in terms of opportunity if Barnes and Holmes are out, we'll say?
Tyrese Halliburton, particularly on Fanduel, where he is 5,400. 5,400 on Fanduel. If those guys are out, Halliburton would become one of my favorite plays on Fanduel. He was in the situation where those guys out the other day. Halliburton didn't end up playing well from a fantasy perspective, but still he got 30 minutes. He just oddly didn't shoot. He only had a 9% usage rate, but everything else there was for him. He had 4 assists. He had his 3 rebounds. So if he would have just taken his normal amount of shots, he probably would have been a really good play in those kind of minutes. But I just think that was more of a fluke. I don't expect him to have a sub 10% usage rate again. And as long as those guys are out, there's more opportunity for Tyrese Halliburton, and 5,400 on FanDuel. That's a pretty appealing price and much cheaper than he is on DK.
And one guy that I just have to mention here because he's popping up to me, and I think, he's one play that right now to me looks good. According to Awesemo, doesn't look quite as good, but still in playable range. Buddy Hield, I think he gets better if we do see Barnes not make it in, maybe even to a lesser extent of, actually I think Holmes being in might be a benefit to him because we did see one of his worst games and it happened to come when Bielitsa was getting more runs. So maybe Bielitsa draws some of those possessions away that would normally go Buddy's way. And Buddy, for the most part, has just been a straight scorer. Like he's not adding much value peripherally. But Buddy to me looks pretty good. Single digit ownership. I just need to point him out here because he is a guy that I get too much of very often, but there have been games where he really does go off in a meaningful way and just nobody's on him because I think people can't figure out Buddy Hield. And to me, this is a day where I'll be on him pretty heavy. So I just have to bring it there. And Greg, I don't know if you have any feel for Buddy Hield at all, but if you have any thoughts, feel free to throw them in.
Yeah, I just like how you know the story of Buddy Hield's age, right?
That he's older than expected?
Yeah, but to the point where he got drafted, nobody knew how old he was. Like they just didn't know. They thought they were drafting a younger player, and there's like, no, surprise, Buddy Hield's actually like 26 or something. So Buddy Hield now is like almost 29 years old. He's like past his prime, but he's only been in the league for a few years. And I legitimately think that he's regressed over the last couple of years. And I don't even think it's because he wasn't good at one point. I think it's literally just because he came into the league when he was so old. They're just a little bit past his prime now at age 29. He's been so inconsistent that he's hard to really figure out. I mean, look at his last 4 games, 34 fantasy points, 16, 34, 13. He's all over the place. So if you want to get some exposure to him in GPP, I'm not going to, but I mean, the upside is obviously there because we see it from time to time, but it's not consistent enough for me to want to invest in, especially when there's so many plays that I know I do like today.
No, that's fair. And there's some things with Buddy. I agree. Like he's definitely doing less per game. Like he used to rebound more. He used to actually get some assists. Now those numbers in 2021 here are coming down by quite a bit, but he is still due to have some positive regression on his shooting. That's one thing that even if he is getting long in the tooth by Greg's standards, Greg likes him young, just popping off the factory line, get into the league. But I like a man with some aging to him, like a fine wine. And 53.3% true shooting. Going back to last year, he was a 56% true shooter. So kind of like Kelly Oubre a couple weeks ago. Maybe Buddy starts to shoot a little bit better here down the stretch, or maybe it waits till after the All-Star game. But either way, I'll find out firsthand tonight and report back. On Chicago's side, Zach LaVine, another play that I think looks pretty good. You can easily get to. I'll be with the field on him. I'm going to make sure to go out of my way to get there. Kobe White, to me, also I think projects pretty well. Wendell Carter looks good according to Awesemo's projections and mine. Garrett Temple, I think, also in the mix here with him expected to be starting again. And it is a revenge game for Garrett Temple. So if you like your role player revenge games in a pace-up spot, I think the pace-up spot and the bad defense for Sacramento are probably going to be the main things for Garrett Temple. But, besides that, maybe he hates Sacramento. So, Greg, all these guys look strong to me, and I really don't mind getting them with the field. Do you have any feel for anybody being a priority play for you from Chicago?
Yeah, I actually don't like Chicago that much. I have some exposure to Zach LaVine, but not as much as the field, just because I'm prioritizing on both DraftKings and Fanduel paying up for LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Damian Lillard. So that prohibits the amount that I'm getting to Zach LaVine. Not that he's not in my player pool. And then the other guys, it's hard to know what to make of their minutes because, and we saw just 2 games ago, the Bulls swapped their starting lineup at halftime. They went the second half. They started. It was Tomas Satoransky started over Kobe White, and then they went with Thad Young over Wendell Carter Jr. and then somebody else they put in the starting lineup over Patrick Williams. But just there's so much inconsistency with the minutes that I don't know what to make of it on a night-to-night basis. Zach LaVine's the only guy that I know we could count on to play big minutes and get usage. I have a little bit of interest in Wendell Carter Jr., 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. I think is a little bit too expensive, but 5,100 is somebody who I'm going to have probably double-digit exposure to on DraftKings. So he's worth getting to. Zach LaVine a little bit, but for the most part, I'm going to be underweight to the field on basically everybody on the Bulls. I have other priorities elsewhere.
Okay. I'm very much more bullish on the on the Bulls. It was one of those things I was going to say without the punny thing, and I was like, well, I'm just going to say it anyway, so I might as well lean into it. But I think the Bulls here in this spot, to me, this game has a lot of potential here where, I don't force game stacks, but I think if I were to game stack one, I think getting different mixes of the pieces here is appealing to me. And honestly, it won't shock me if today Zach LaVine's the slate breaker here, just because as our boy Adam has talked a lot on the other deeper dives, the weekday deeper dives where you get the pro crew here, we're just here doing janitorial work for the most part. But true shooting for him on the year, 64% for Zach LaVine. He's going against a Sacramento team that gives up 49% shooting from the floor and 40% from deep. Like, this is kind of the recipe for Zach LaVine for our old pal Drop Roses, who unfortunately hasn't been in the chat recently. Zach LaVine, if you're ever a day to buy his top shots to go all in and to tout him in the YouTube chat, I think this is the day for Zach LaVine. Got 20 minutes left here, so hit the like button, guys. Coming up next, you got Emac and Terry taking you through everything else you're going to need to know. Any news that comes, they will be here for you guys. And this game right now, this is the real money game. So let's flip the hat. Let's get it going. It's money time. It's got Phoenix and Memphis. And Memphis, ironically, the reason that this is the money game, I want to talk about them first, is because you're not costing any money to play any Memphis Grizzlies, with them being bereft of pretty much everybody on their roster. Kyle Anderson out. We do have also Brandon Clark out. Dylan Brooks out. I feel like there's one more I'm missing there, but Greg,
Grayson
just give
Allen.
me your who's it? Oh, wait, who's
Grayson Allen.
Grayson Allen, yeah, another guy, just another body there, not the most productive guy, which is why he kind of slipped my mind, but makes the minutes secure for pretty much everybody. I think the expectation is they'll have 9 guys available, including Sean McDermott, and Sean McDermott only in for 18 minutes here. So, definitely the piece here that could get a little bit lost in the rotation. But Greg, just give me your overall thoughts here, because I'll let you see where the chips are falling for you first. But Xavier Tillman going to be highly owned today. Desmond Bane going to be less highly owned, but Tillman is going to be the great chalk, it seems, on DraftKings in particular.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, because the power forward options are not good at all on FanDuel. And then you have Xavier Tillman, who is priced at 4,100 on FanDuel. We've seen him start with some success in the past, and it's just such a thin rotation. The only other thing I'm going to mention here is that Justice Winslow, in terms of injuries, he's questionable to play. He hasn't played yet this year, and he's dealt with so many injuries over the last couple of years. So I don't think he's going to play. He's been out all year, hasn't even been on the injury report. Maybe he'll go out and warm up with the team. Even if he does play, I don't think it's going to be a very significant amount of minutes. He's been out for so long, and dealt with so many injuries. I wouldn't expect any more than, like 12 to 15 minutes from Justice Winslow. But as for the other guys on the team, first of all, John Morant and Jonas Valanciunas, I think, are both strong plays. John Morant, I'm not getting to as much as I thought I was going to, just because there's so many other guards I like in that price range. But Jonas Valanciunas is going to be a primary target for me at center on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Morant more of a secondary target. I agree with you on Tillman. I think that he's overall the best value play on the team. I also feel confident he's going to start. Beyond that, I want to see what the starting lineup is. I have no feel for who they're going to start. It could be Desmond Bane. They could go with Tyus Jones, go with a 2-point guard backcourt. It could be DeAnthony Melton in the backcourt. I'm really unsure of who they're going to start. And whoever my favorite value plays are, it's going to be dictated by the starting lineup.
No, I think that's reasonable. Let's do a little guesswork on it, because I think we have enough time to talk about it. So Morant and Jay Val are going to be there for sure. At one of the guard spots, I feel like Desmond Bane being in, given that he started before, seems right. Tillman being the 4 seems right to me. And then, do you think do we get a Conchar start? I mean, that would be nice to me, but I think the 5th spot's really the question. Like, I feel like feel pretty confident that Tillman and Bane start alongside Ja and Jonas, but Melton, I feel like you kind of want off the second unit, even though being in the first unit would secure his minutes a bit more. I don't know. I think either it's got to be Conchar or Melton, though, I think, for the 5th starting spot.
I'm going to say Melton just because he's been the better player from what we've seen of him. Conchar, a rookie, so they haven't really seen him play all that much. But in general, Melton's played well when he's been on the court. He's always been somebody who I thought the Grizzlies should give more playing time to. And maybe this is a little bit jaded from a fantasy aspect, but we've seen some, really big fantasy games from him, even in limited minutes, where there's times that he's broken slates where he's played, like 25 minutes and scored 40 fantasy points. I think we saw that a couple weeks ago, a game against the Spurs. He had 26 minutes and scored 41 fantasy points. So we've seen some of those games from him, and he's, for the season, a pretty strong fantasy producer. He averages over a fantasy point per minute this year. He's playing 21 minutes per game, averaging 22.25 DraftKings points in that time. So he's somebody who, if he starts and then we could feel pretty confident that he plays, like 28 to 30 minutes, then he would become definitely one of the top value plays on the slate. Tillman's already there. And I think Bane, also somebody who I agree with you. I think he's fairly likely to start. He would be an okay play to me. Definitely somebody that I'm going to have in a good portion of my lineups, but he wouldn't be a priority play in terms of the other Grizzlies value plays, because I think whoever starts at shooting guard is going to be number 2 for me in terms of value, and then Tillman's going to be number 1.
Brendan Maring saying first time playing Superdraft tonight, because you guys have been talking it up. Any tips for that tonight? One would be that John Morant seems to be pretty undervalued on Superdraft today. One of Alex's top projected Superdraft plays. So that'd be the first thing that I would say for Superdraft. The other part would be that the rest of the Grizzlies, for the most part, don't look that great. And that's one thing we've talked about a little bit more on the Superdraft shows. Actually, we don't have a Superdraft show today, right? I don't think so. Let me just make sure. But one thing with the Superdraft shows is that we have been seeing a lot of ownership sometimes, where people in the chat, especially, who are interested in playing like the Isaiah Stewarts of the world, the value plays that you're getting on DraftKings or FanDuel more so. And I think for me, that's one thing. And there is a Super Draft show today, so just keep that in mind. They're going an extra half hour, so they'll take you through all the finer points of Super Draft. Emac and Terry will coming up after Live Before Lock. In addition to any breaking news that comes, that's a big part of it too. But like, some people will probably play a lot of Tillman on Super Draft, and that's not going to be the best move. He just doesn't pop up as being that highly ranked of a play, according to Awesemo. Whereas John Morant, he's got a 1.4x multiplier. Like, his projection doesn't take as big of a jump as I would have thought relative to, where it would have been on DraftKings and FanDuel. But on Super Draft, him having that 1.4x multiplier, like, he projects reasonably well. If he has a ceiling day, that 1.4x could be crucial. So I think a guy like John Morant would be crucial for Super Draft potentially. Greg, any thoughts at all, I guess, on that? Because I think, to me, like, just don't play the Banes and the Tillmans of the world on Super Draft, because I think that's always the risk that, or the inclination that people have, and it seems to be not a great move overall.
Did you see what Valanciunas' multiplier was? I don't have it in front of me, and also I can't play Super Draft in the state I'm in, so it's not.
He's right behind Ja at 1 point in projections, and he's also got a 1.4x.
Okay, so yeah, 1.4x. Not really. I think the other day I did a show with Josh where Valanciunas like a 1.5x multiplier, and that was a little more favorable for Valanciunas. It's funny because the way that Superdraft works, where there is no pricing and it's just the multiplier, you can get wildly different best value plays across across all the different sites. So the Grizzlies, who are guys who, I mean, they're easily going to be my highest owned team on FanDuel and DraftKings today, but at least looking at some of the Superdraft pricing, I agree with you, and I don't think they look like nearly as good plays on Superdraft.
Chad Gifford, I asked this question earlier, but asked if Melton will start. Again, we don't know this one yet, but I think Melton, to me, is still one of the stronger plays on the site overall, not on Superdraft. Still think it's a John Morant or Jonas Valanciunas situation on Superdraft. But here, Greg, I think that D'Anthony Melton, to me, is the one play that feels the most undervalued. I guess you could make a case for Ja, too, but it kind of surprised me to see Ja. Like I do, rates boost for these guys relative to their on-off court time. And it's hard to figure out what the rates would be because there aren't a lot of games that don't have Dylan Brooks, that don't have Kyle Anderson, that don't have Brandon Clark on the court. So it's, a limited sample you're looking at. But in that limited sample, John Morant, 33% usage, 45% assist rate. And I think if you hem it down or, strip it down a little bit more, the numbers get really crazy for Ja at certain points. You mentioned him briefly, but like, is there a right number for you with Ja Morant to get to tonight? And it just feels to be crazy that we're going to the value, and I get it because of the prices and all that. But Ja Morant's probably got a really big ceiling, and based on his usage, his assist upside, all those things. And it's wild that there's only going to be 15% played on DraftKings, and I just feel like it's something we need to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, in my builds right now, I could say I have him right around 10% on Fanduel and DraftKings. And it's not that I don't like Morant for his price. I think he's great from a points per dollar basis. There's just so many point guards I like today that it made it hard for me to really prioritize them because at a certain point, there's an opportunity cost associated with it where at least on FanDuel, I like LaMelo Ball better than him. I like Damian Lillard more. I like De'Aaron Fox more. I like D'Anthony Melton more, assuming that he starts. And then I get to Morant after all of those guys. So unless I want to say that, like, hey, I don't want to have nearly as much LaMelo Ball, I don't want to have nearly as much Damian Lillard, and I do, that's the only way for me to get some more Morant is I have to take away from other plays that I really like. So it doesn't have as much to do with Morant as a play individually, because I agree if we're just looking at points per dollar, he would be great. It's just there are a lot of other point guard plays that I think are really strong plays on the slate, and he's like my fifth favorite.
If you're going to rank the value for Memphis, and I guess we can go site specific here, but I know people always like that. So can you give me your best shot at a ranking here? Obviously, accounting for the fact that there's no way to perfectly rank these guys.
So Tillman is number one on both FanDuel and DraftKings. The only way that changes to me is if he doesn't start. As long as he starts, he's going to be my favorite. Number two is going to be either Melton or Conchar. If either of them start, as long as that's the case, that's going to be my second favorite. And then assuming that Desmond Bane starts at small forward, he'd be my third favorite value play. So Tillman one, whoever starts at shooting guard two, and then Desmond Bane is my third favorite.
So for me, it would be, and these are all guys I have appreciable amounts of, or I'm expecting to get, would be Tillman, then Bane, then Melton, then Conchar, and then Gorgie Jang. Just because, why not? Get a little bit of everybody in there, but Gorgie Jang also going to have a little bit of ownership on him. I will be with the field on that. And the one guy I didn't get much of is Tyus Jones, which I guess is more of a positionality thing more than anything, because he doesn't have that great of a projection, and also he's in a point guard spot. It can only be a point guard. I think that's the reason why I wouldn't get there. But Memphis, clearly a team you should be looking at for value today. And if you also just want to get different from the field, if you don't buy in here, the reason you're buying it is because they just have to give minutes somewhere. There's so many bodies out for them who actually do eat up possessions, do eat up usage, do eat up assists, all those things. But if you wanted to get away, just don't play Memphis, guys. That's the first thing you do on a 5-game slate. And Greg, I guess the last question here, if you had to fade one guy from Memphis, who would it be of the value?
If I had to fade one, it's going to be none of them because there's nobody I'm fading right now. So I don't want to tell people to fade somebody that I'm not going to be fading.
Okay. For me, I think it's Tyus, but that's still, for the reasons I just mentioned, I think the positionality is a big part. And if Tyus somehow starts, that would change here. But Alex has him in for just 20 minutes, and that's not enough for me. And Sean McDermott right now in at 18 minutes to a non-play for me as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Not Sean McDermott, except I don't think anybody's playing him anyway.
No, but you gotta mention he's 31. He's not even flat mid. Like, how is Sean McDermott 3,100? That's just being mean to him. He's not a 3,100 player. Let him have his shine as a minimum salary guy. Phoenix, anybody popping up for you at all? Devin Booker, I think, fine in tournaments. Chris Paul, probably the same thing, though. I didn't land on much Chris Paul with my sorting process. Did get a little bit of Devin Booker, very little, under 5%. And DeAndre Ayton, I think, the only guy here who projects decently. This team is now pretty fully stocked, and I don't know that I see much upside, barring some minutes shifting around. Frank Kaminsky rumored to maybe pick up a start today, so that could give him some usage, some usage in DFS lineups and some actual real life usage. But anything for you on Phoenix here in a pretty low-paced game?
Yeah, this is my second least favorite team on the slate behind the Miami Heat. There's just not that much to see here. When Chris Paul and Devin Booker are both active, they rarely have big games. We've seen Devin Booker go off in games with no Chris Paul. We've seen Chris Paul go off in games without Devin Booker, but both of them are more expensive than they were to start the season. And in general, both of them are pretty capped in terms of their upside when each of them are healthy. DeAndre Ayton, I have a little bit of exposure to on FanDuel just because the center options are pretty limited, but it's only him in 7% of lineups right now. I don't have him at all on Draftkings. I don't have the other guys on Draftkings right now. So on the whole, the Suns not a team I'm getting to.
And one last Memphis question. We'll move on to the last game, which is a big one with Washington and Portland. Mason Ediger in the YouTube chat saying, how many Memphis guys did you play in one lineup? I set my cap for them to 3. I do think you can get it to 4, especially for cash, but I just felt safer doing 3. Greg, do you have a lean here on how many guys you'd want to cap your Memphis players on?
No, I don't have any caps for it that I set, and I don't have an issue getting to 4 of them. It also depends on which guys, right? Because if you're playing Melton, Conchar, Tillman, and Bane, let's just say. So like 4 cheap guys. That's a lot different than playing Morant, Valanciunas, and then 2 of the value plays. If you're playing 4 really cheap guys, it's not hard to see a situation where all those guys get to value because they only need like 20 fantasy points of what their price points are. So if you just get a bunch of those, like Xavier Tillman's 3,400, you said you like Gorgie Jang. I have some exposure to him also. He's 3,300. If those guys score, 20, 22 DraftKings points, that's a good outcome for their price tags. So it's not hard to envision both of these guys having good games, considering that they hardly have to do anything other than play a handful of minutes to be able to pay off those salaries.
And then, what is this? Mr. OG DFS saying, who wants to rely on Memphis to make them money, LOL, which is, I think, a fair way to look at it when you are playing some of these guys that feel flimsy, but it's really more about what they open up. And some of the guys that, Greg talked about earlier, you want to play all these stars, and there are stars who are in fantastic spots tonight. And whether you're doing the Curry, LeBron, Lillard tier of guys, whether you're trying to get some of De'Aaron Fox and Levine, getting to Memphis guys makes it all a lot easier. And there really isn't any other spots here where you have guys who are sub 4K on DraftKings or comparably cheap on FanDuel who can do the same things. Tillman just put up 25 or 27 fantasy points last night. And that was with everybody there. So it's not that you expect the same thing to happen today, but these are guys who have, legitimate upsides relative to their value. And I think that's the main thing. It's not, just being like, oh, these guys suck, like I'm not going to play them. Yeah.
But also think of before we go on to the next game, and I see we're running out of time too, so I'll just hit this really quick. This is a math problem too, right? There's 2 guys that have substantial price in Ja Morant and Jonas Valanciunas. Outside of them, everybody's almost min price. And unless you're saying 100% of the production or almost all of it goes to Morant and Valanciunas, a handful of those value guys have to have big games. I would be shocked if none of the cheap Grizzlies guys end up in the optimal lineup. Say at least one of them is. That's a near guarantee.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one getting there is definitely, it's got to happen just because there are so many minutes and so many possessions left behind that somebody's going to be productive there. And we have seen guys be productive before. Last game on the slate, one with the highest combined total, Washington and Portland, 242 combined total here. Washington side for me, Greg, is pretty easy. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of anybody. Bradley Beal came up some for me. He's always a viable tournament play. You can make a similar case for Russell Westbrook, but on DraftKings, he is $10,000. And that means I have to give up Curry, I have to give up Lillard, or I have to give up LeBron. I don't see that being the move that I would want. So let's talk Washington first, because I think you're going to be on the similar page. Anybody for Washington at all popping up for you?
No, it's really funny to have a game. This game has the highest total on the slate by a pretty wide margin. It is at 242 right now. So that's a massive total, but still. And the other thing too is with Beal and Westbrook, they pick up almost all of the Wizards' production. And that makes it so that there's no role players that are almost ever viable for them. And then I agree with you also in terms of Beal and Westbrook. I like the other pay-up options better. Both of them are pretty expensive. So I have a minimal amount of exposure to both of them, but neither of them are primary plays for me. So if you're only playing, 1 to 3 lineups, I wouldn't even be considering Westbrook or Beal. I'd be going elsewhere with exposure.
Yeah, I think Beal is in play just because he's a little bit cheaper, and we have tournament upside. And I think it just for me came up in some of the lineups, but overall these guys aren't priorities, and they are. It won't shock me if one of them does have some GPP upside, but they're also not completely unknown either. 13% for both on DraftKings, so keep that in mind. On Portland's side, I think one thing worth noting here, which is interesting, and I heard Alex talk about it on the show this morning, the strategy show. Lillard's rates the last 2 weeks are starting to look like what they did in that previous hot run I think he had last January. January, and maybe it's just an early year thing for Damian Lillard, but the way that he performed last year without McCollum, we're seeing recently last 2 weeks up to a 37.5% usage rate, the assist rate for him also up to 44%. And if you put him at these rates, I think that Lillard looks like the best play amongst the big three high-priced guys that we've talked about, Greg. I think that's a ballsy move that I might bite me in the ass a little bit here to play Lillard at these rates that are not the largest sample size, but it's still, 250 minutes or so over the last couple of weeks that Lillard's been doing this. And I'm willing to buy in now with a gigantic total playing Washington in a pace-up spot. Washington's defense, we all know it sucks. They play fast. Like, these are all things that I think could lead to a Lillard ceiling game. So I'm going to be there heavy, but how do you feel about him? I know you've said it before, but what's your official stance?
Yeah, Damian Lillard has a usage rate over 30% in 8 consecutive games. He's gone over 40% in 2 of the last 3 games. With all of the injuries the Blazers are dealing with, they have no choice other than to play Damian Lillard big minutes. And when he's out there, he's taking a bunch of shots. The Blazers have the highest team total on the slate, and it's about as good of a matchup possible against the Wizards. So Damian Lillard's my favorite pay-up option on the slate. He's only $9,900 on FanDuel. That is way too cheap. So I love Dame. And then just to put a bow on this, Enes Kanter is my favorite center play on FanDuel, and he's also viable on Draftkings. Nothing that really interests me all that much from the role players, though. It's going to be a lot of Dame and then a lot of Kanter on FanDuel.
Kanter to me looks a little bit over-owned on DraftKings, but I think, not terrible by any stretch. And I would point out to Derek Jones, I think there's a little bit of a concern here because we should have Rodney Hood back in there taking some minutes away, but this is kind of a Derek Jones game, a pace-up spot. We're going to get some easy dunks, some easy peripherals, some easy block steals. Like, that's Derek Jones' time. So if Rodney Hood somehow didn't make it in, I think I would bump Derek Jones up a good amount. But right now, he's just a guy that I want to get a little bit of a taste of. Greg, what are the plugs here before we clear out of the way for our old pal Emac and Terry, who are doing the hour live before lock, and then the bonus 30 minutes here talking Superdraft and whatever other news may break?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at GErenbergDFS and stick around to watch live before lock, because that's where we're going to find out whatever the Grizzlies starting lineup is. We don't know it right now, but those guys will hopefully find it. If not, actually, probably the ideal scenario is that we don't know it before lock and it comes out after lock, and then there's going to be late swaps to get some good value.
And follow me at Chris Spags, follow at Awesemo_com, and smash that like button because you got Emac and Terry coming up next. Make them feel good. We appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend, and good luck. I am 6 years older. Way to rub it right in my face, Mac. Thanks. Make me feel bad on the way out. Right? Good show, guys.
That's it. What's up?
Oh, we just got the Lakers lined up.
Oh, good.
Of course they are. They always are. Hot like my wife. Yeah, see? Just in case she's watching. Can't talk about specs.
Easy brownie points. Nicely done. Hey, does 10 o'clock work for you tomorrow morning to jump on that rules?
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I actually went to bed relatively early last night. Got almost 10 hours of sleep. Didn't set an alarm. Got up at like 9:15. That never happens. I took a nap today for about an hour. I'm going to go to bed early. Well, I'd like to try to stay up and watch Portland and Washington. That may not happen because I try in the past and I make it till about halftime on these 10 o'clock starts.
I hear you. I was kind of wondering where you were going when that was. I want to stay up late and watch and just that fraction of a second before you finished the word Portland, I was wondering where you were going.
All right, Awesemo, here we go. It's your old pal Emac coming to you with NBA live before lock, joined by one T McBee, Digital B21 over there on Twitter. It is Terrence McBride. We call him Terry. How are you doing, my friend? We haven't done a show in a hot minute.
Yeah, it's been at least a week, right? So doing pretty well. We've chatted a little bit in between. For those out there that were wondering what we were scheduling for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Emac is joining my long-standing season-long fantasy baseball league, which is, I'm going to throw it in the running with the most complex leagues in the country. We have multiple minor league systems, all sorts of stuff. a many-page document was sent to EMAC, and we're going to get on Zoom and explain it to him tomorrow morning. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, and let's just say I'm taking over a poor team. Brian Dozier was probably the best player. He announced his retirement earlier this week. So now I'm down to Kenley Jansen, who may or may not close in pressure situations for the Dodgers. So I only have one way to go. That is up.
We'll tell you all about how to renounce those guys.
Yes, so we're going to have some fun on that, but hopefully we have some fun tonight. We have the NBA. We, of course, are sponsored by Superdraft. We will be sticking on for an extra half hour. They are not locking until 8:30 tonight, so you'll want to hang out with us. You can make some lineups for there. They are running some of their lock times a little bit later, so they know people can have, a hot minute to get on over there, figure out what's going on, and then we'll talk to you about their different scoring system, which is quite unique. So they have no position or no salary caps. They do have some position flexibility, but a lot of their players have multi-position flexibility. You start 3 guards, 3 forwards, and a center, and the scoring is on steroids. No salary cap. How does that work? Aren't we all going to pick the same players? No, because they have set up salary point multipliers for each of their players. So if you're a superstar like LeBron James, Damian Lillard, some of those guys, you have between a 1, a 105, maybe a 1.1 multiplier. If you're down like an Enes Kanter or someone that's a part-time player, you're going to probably a 1.45, 1.6, 1.7. Might even see some of those Memphis guys today at 1.9 or higher. So that is the great equalizer. Their scoring is a combination of DraftKings and Fanduel. 3 points for blocks and steals, bonus points for 3-pointers, bonus points for triple doubles, double doubles, etc. We'll get into all.
Does anybody hear me?
I can hear you. You should be there. Oh, you were there for a minute. You may be gone. But in any event, I'll keep talking because Terry will be able to make it back with us. Let me just say, I see our stream's lagging a little bit in general. So hopefully you guys can still see me. But let me get my notes page up here and so I can see a chat. But we'll get Terry to pop back in here. In any event, it is a lot of fun over there. A very unique scoring system. A lot of people get caught off guard by that. We do have projections specifically for their site, so you don't have to worry about all of those promo code or all of those calculations. Promo code is Awesemo21. We'll get you $50 on your first deposit of $50 or more. Check it out tonight. They are running a $40,000 contest, $6,000, $6,500 going to first. All right, Terry, I believe you are back with us. You good?
I believe I am. I wasn't sure if I was gone or you were gone or who was talking over who, but I guess you were still here and I was gone. So that's probably a good thing.
And Chad has heard more than enough from me. We talked about the super draft. I'm going to mention Kyle Kuzma starting. The Lakers are starting LeBron, KCP, Matthews, Kuzma, Gasol. We have various injury news that we will get to along the way. But in the meantime, Terry, I'm going to turn our first game over to you. It is the Golden State Warriors at Charlotte. That is, isn't that where Seth Curry grew up? Revenge? No? Remember Me? Homecoming? I forget which narrative, but it seems to be a good one. No Kevon Looney or James Wiseman for Golden State. Charlotte has Caleb Martin, not Cody Martin, back. They will be without Devontae Graham. However, coming back is Gordon Hayward. They also have PJ Washington and, as I mentioned, Cody Martin are their healthy guys. 234 over under here. Charlotte underdogs by 2 at home. Michael Jordan will not like that. Take it away, Terry.
Yeah, so on the narrative front, that's never one I get behind or any of them really. I always wonder what's going on with some of the people who come up with these narratives too. Like if you're going home, I guess he's happy.
I'm right here. I'm right here. You're talking about me to me. Come on.
That was your narrative? I thought somebody in the chat made that up. So
no, I made that up.
You go home that you're like, I want to take revenge out of my hometown.
That's why I changed it to Reunion, Remember Me, something along those lines.
See, I'm thinking he's all, home cooking, all fat and happy, a little bit lazy. I don't think we play into narratives. I don't think we worry about these things. That's where we have to get off, right? So definitely, Steph Curry's very much in play for me. Draymond is in play for me for this game. I don't love the idea of an Andrew Wiggins, but he'll probably pop up in some of these lineups. He looks over-owned on both sites for who he is and the role we expect him to play tonight, so I'm hoping to get away from him on that excuse. On the Charlotte side of things, there's a few pieces that I like. LaMelo is coming up like crazy in my lineups for FanDuel. I assume he'd be coming up just as much. He looks very, very good on both sites. I love the opportunity for him without Devontae Graham playing there. I think it benefits him a little bit more than it benefits Terry Rozier. And then we're going to get Gordon Hayward. So I'm going to have a ton of lineups with both LaMelo and Hayward in them. Just going by how this slate is breaking down, there's a lot of money to spend at point guard and a lot of money to spend at small forward. So throw LeBron into that mix. The three of those guys, I never like to talk about, oh, I've made a core and this is my core for these lineups. It's not how we do things. But those guys are going to be in so many of my lineups that you could easily look at them and think I did build it that way, or just call it that if you want. I'll have pieces of Terry Rozier. I'll have some PJ Washington. He slots in. He's 56 on FanDuel, 53 on DK, where you can get him as a center as well. I think the center eligibility makes him somewhat interesting as a mix and match piece over on DK. There's kind of a flat tier after you get past the top two options on DraftKings for center tonight, where you can just kind of swap around a bunch of those guys in different power forward center util combinations. I talked about this on the game plan show a little bit. And I think PJ lands in that group. So he's definitely relevant for me as well. And I got to Miles Bridges just in doing some of the build. I think he comes up in enough of the optimal lineups, and he's a cheap power forward pivot where PJ Washington is getting a little bit of ownership, 24% on FanDuel, 18% on DraftKings. So he's going over a little bit in terms of our leverage score, where Bridges is coming down, is giving you positive leverage on both sites for a similar price, similar opportunity, and reasonably close in terms of the optimal lineup rate, the boom score, and all of that. So I got to him just to build in a little bit of differentiation in one of the lineups that I built earlier, the one that I did on the game plan show. So just kind of top to bottom on both sides of this one. I don't think there's any is there anybody that stands out to you on Golden State that you want to talk about that I missed?
So Draymond Green, a little bit. He's definitely getting a fair number of assists. Those have really come up, so I don't mind that. He's someone I generally don't go to all that often, but we are down to just 10 teams in our player pool, so I think he is someone that is worthwhile. Clearly Steph Curry, but I'm liking a lot of the people in the Portland-Washington game tonight. I think they're all equal and or superior plays to these guys, but I think the field's going to end up there. So, do you ever get disappointed rostering Curry? No, because he has the ability to get 50 real fantasy points. I mean, outside of Joel Embiid and Jamal Murray, who else can do that? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got the ability to go out there and just light up a slate. We saw a performance with crazy upside come from Joel Embiid last night, where we thought we were getting enough out of Vooch, and all of a sudden Embiid lights up the slate with 90 some odd FanDuel points. And I didn't check my lineups. I got a little lost in clicking on different things and googling different possibilities on Top Shot last night. And by the time I remembered
you're doing that now too.
Oh, I've been there since day one.
Oh boy,
I wish I'd been there since day one. I've been there since day one when we all found out about it.
Oh, all right. Well, I we'll talk about that at a later date because I'm curious to figure out what the heck this thing even is. So I understand cryptocurrency. I actually have half a Bitcoin. And that's where I stop.
We'll get to it. But that's I'm never upset about getting to Steph Curry to that point, right? If I had found out that Embiid was in more of my lineups last night than I had thought he was in, and that I was planning on having him, that would have been a really pleasant surprise. Steph is capable of giving you that sort of pleasant surprise if you get to him in an unexpected amount. And he's a player that I'd actually like to try and force in a little bit, maybe, given that we've got some salary to spend at the position.
All right. That's kind of going to cover most everything from that game. Again, we did have the deeper dive cover all of this. We, of course, have the free deep dive. That is our key premium, or used to be a premium article. It's free in front of the paywall now for the remainder of the season. That is written usually Monday through Friday by Adam Scherer. He's been getting a little break there. And you're getting Laffy D, who, by the way, was one of the originators of that article as well back in the day. So you get those guys on the weekdays, and then you get Terry on Sundays, and you get Nerd Ask Greg on Saturday. So this is the most in-depth article in the book. It goes game by game. That's important because there's not a lot of late slate centric content, particularly free content. Not only do we have late slate shows on all the weekdays, we also have the content here behind the paywall, in front of the paywall, and then behind the paywall, we have late slate ownership projections, which we're the only site that is doing that right now. You might recognize some of the names on the masthead these days. Well, you won't recognize the real names, but Alex Baker is Awesemo. Steve Buzzard, the Colts, and Sean's on, who is, wait for it, Sean's on out there in the DFS world. He is now behind the scenes here with Awesemo as well. They have some amazing minds, and they are putting this into the tools here. You guys can get to these tools. There are many ways to do that. To do that, we will talk about those throughout the show. Game number 2, Miami at LA. Out for Miami, we have Goran Dragic and Chris Silva. In, we have Gabe Vincent. Out for the Lakers, of course, is Anthony Davis, who is out for at least another month. Dennis Schroeder is out with the health and safety protocol. And then we have Kuzma and Markieff Morris both available to play. We're not entirely sure who is going to start this one. This is where it becomes interesting. Clearly, better value plays have opened up, but there are still decent value plays in this game between KCP and Alex Caruso. I'm a little more nervous about Matthews. He did start the last game. Basically, all he does is reverse pass on the perimeter or take the shot at this point in his career. 34 years old, 12 in the league. So he's seen his better days. And then the other guy, Taylor Horton Tucker, THT, is we don't know exactly what's going on with his minutes, but he is probably the third best ball handler on the team besides LeBron and Alex Caruso. And I'm almost saying Alex Baker every time I say Alex Caruso at this point. It's getting crazy at this point.
The shared first name makes it so much more difficult.
The two are melding together in my mind. But at that point, tonight will be his 33rd NBA game in 2 years, his 2 years career for THT. And here he is, probably the third best ball handler because they hate Cook for some reason. What do you like or dislike from this game? Where is LeBron on the pantheon of tonight's stars for you?
Like somewhere way up there as compared to everybody else in this game who's down there. It's LeBron all day from this game. I think he's a phenomenal play on both sites. His leverage scores come down some since I wrote the column earlier in the day, but it still looks pretty spectacular. 5.3 on Draftkings. So you're getting him significantly more than he's owned by the public. You're getting him in the optimal lineups in our simulations. And then on Fanduel, an 11.6 leverage score. That's come down from like a 15 earlier in the day, but the public is still not getting to him enough. I think people just have, maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's, I don't want to roster the very best player in the world. I'm more clever than that. I don't know what it is. I think sometimes people overthink these things. LeBron James, he's playing without AD. He's playing without Dennis Schroeder. Or Schroeder, or however we say that. Everybody pronounces all these names differently. I get so lost. So regardless, he's going to be playing amongst a group of basically replacement level guys. There's nobody else on this team that I'm worried about taking the ball away from him if he decides he wants to score or whatever he wants to do. We can get to some of the value. I don't really like rostering Kyle Kuzma very much, but I can see the argument. He will come up in some of my process. But I just never like getting to the guy. He just never seems to produce for me. 0.86 fantasy point per minute guy, has plenty of run tonight, has all the opportunity in the world to produce. Is just generally my feeling on him. I would get some Caldwell Pope through process. I would maybe get to probably not Trez on Fanduel, but I would get to a little bit of Caruso. The guy I'm interested in out of that group is the guy the public is getting to less, who I like more, who's Taylor Horton Tucker. I think he's really relevant. The only thing that's in question for me is what are the minutes going to look like. At 21 minutes, what Alex has him projected for, he looks pretty terrific in Alex's numbers, in my numbers, in terms of being an off-the-board value play. He's coming up in 6% of the optimals on FanDuel, 12% or in the optimal 6% of the time on FanDuel, 12.5% on DK. He's only 3,600 over on DraftKings, where you get him in the small forward spot. So I really like the value there. And if he sees 24 minutes, 25 minutes, we get a little bit more of him in an unpredictable spot. I think he could really smash through that ceiling and give us a nice score here where not enough people are going to be on him. So I think he's a really good leverage play from some of the other value guys. I went through this on the game plan show, and I slotted him into the shooting guard spot just because we're picking up so much leverage. Excuse me. And such a good multiplier for our ownership product number that he just helps so much in what we do. So it's a tournament play for sure, because he might end up playing 16 minutes or 18 minutes and do nothing for us. But I really like the play today.
Yeah, there is a lot of variation between those guys. So, Marc Gasol, not really interested in. He's the starter, as is Matthews, not really interested in him. Caruso will play all of the minutes, most likely that LeBron is not on the court, plus he'll play alongside of him and probably be in the closing lineup. I would think KCP also is in the closing lineup. He is, on the back half of his career, but he's muddling along this season, 0.69 fantasy points per minute. Nice in some scenarios, probably not as nice in the DFS scenarios. And then, the wild card, Taylor Horton, that name's just going to get me. I'm not even going to try it again. It's now a mental block with me for those. What do you like from the Miami side here? We mostly know what that rotation is probably going to be like. At least we know who the players are going to be that Coach Spoelstra will be choosing among.
Yeah, I'll take some mix and match pieces of this kind of as I get them. I'm not going out of my way to avoid these guys, but I wouldn't also be going out of my way, I don't think, to roster them. It's a short enough slate. So, I definitely want shares of Bam. I definitely want shares of Jimmy. Everybody else, I'll kind of just take what I get. And then looking at Butler, he's a really good example. If you're making a short set of lineups, comparing him to LeBron, on Fanduel, and then it applies a little bit less maybe on DK, but it's still very much in play on DK. I just think he's going to be a little over-owned, and he's very expensive, where he slots in next to LeBron, who is so massively favorable, coming up in nearly 50% of the simulated optimal lineups on Fanduel, 36% on DK. Just by comparison, those guys do not line up in that number. And that's the most important piece of the puzzle here. So, yeah, you're getting a good median projection out of Butler, but you're not getting a ton of upside for the money and for the opportunity, where with LeBron, you're just getting so much more. And then there are other good value plays down the board, and I say value, it's not even value. A guy like Gordon Hayward for a couple thousand less fits into that second small forward spot a lot better than Jimmy does. So he's just priced appropriately probably for who he is at 9,200 on FanDuel, 89 on DK. Probably could be a little bit more expensive on DK even, but he's just right about where he should be. So you're not gaining any advantage. You're just playing Jimmy Butler kind of as who he is and what he should be, which is fine, but you're not getting a leg up on the field by doing it, and the field is going to be there.
All right. We've got 3 more games to go. We've got 3,000 people watching us now almost. We only have 480 likes. If you're going to want anything regarding player ownership from me, we're going to need to get to about 600, 700 likes before that's even going to happen. But I will tell you, free content right now, dropping it into the YouTube chat, are the player projections tonight. We also have NHL player projections free. There is a late slate going off at 9 o'clock for the NHL. And then we also today had free the MMA rankings. So if you want to go retroactively look and see how that worked out, you can check out the content. You can see what it looks like, what it is, etc. We do have individual sports packages and individual weekly sports packages for all of our content. Definitely check that out. Also, if you want to follow Awesemo_COM, we're about 300 Twitter followers away from 30,000. As soon as we get to 30,000, we will be giving away 30 free 1-week premium packages via a giveaway. So get us there.
Sure.
Come on. Plenty of ways to get in here for free. Plenty of ways to get in here at a discount as well. Our next game, this is at the halfway point here. Phoenix at Memphis. Let's go see. I don't believe we have a starting lineup yet. This game is the 8:30 game, or is this the 9 o'clock game? I've lost track. I was looking at a schedule that I had pulled from. This is 9 o'clock game. Oops, I'm sorry. 2 9 o'clock games. I had pulled one early and it was all mucked up because of the power outages and postponements, and it's just been a disaster trying to look at these schedules. So now I just try to remember to go to look at it each day. So we don't have the lineup yet, but we know Dylan Brooks is out because of his thigh injury. We know that Killian Tilly is out still with a foot injury. Amazingly, Justice Winslow is actually questionable. He's been dealing with that hip injury. He has not set foot on a court since January of last year, and he only played 10 games last season. So I don't expect him to play. If he does, I don't expect him to play a lot of minutes. And then we have a bunch of people resting. Brandon Clark, Kyle Anderson, Grayson Allen. Feels like every year we get 1 or 2 weekend games where Memphis is literally resting everybody. I remember there was a game maybe it's been 4 or 5 seasons ago, where Matt Barnes. I was going to say, who was the guy that beat up Derek Fisher for dating his wife? Ex-wife? Oh yeah, Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes had a triple-double in one of these games. I remember that. It's like they were literally down to like 7 players that took the court, and I think 4 of them got over 40 fantasy points. Right. Here we are again.
Vaguely remember that.
What do you want to do with Memphis? Then we'll talk the Phoenix Suns.
I think you encapsulated the 2 things that Barnes is most known for in his entire life too. That's well done. I think there's a ton of value on the Memphis side of things. I'm not getting to a ton from the other side of this game. So diving into Memphis, the big name at the top of the board. Well, he's not a big name by any means, but Xavier Tillman is putting up big numbers next to his name on this board, which is what we care about. Crushing the optimal lineup rate.
Oh, slide update. News guy just put it in our premium Slack here. Justice Winslow is officially good to go today. Grizzlies will be smart with his minutes. The analysis still stands. I'm thinking somewhere between 12 and 16. 18 is like an 80th percentile outcome, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not even going to really worry about him. He's got a projection just because he's got minutes, but if he's in any of my lineups, I would be shocked at the end of this. Honestly, did not even remember he was on the team when I woke up this morning. So not going to be getting to him. I wish him well. I hope he plays. I hope he's healthy and all of that. The guys I am going to be playing, Xavier Tillman working his way into a ton of my power forward spots on Fanduel for 4,100. I would have to be assuming that I would be close to 100% of them on DK at 3,400. I think he was in the 90s for me on Fanduel in my last crunch and sort that I did. Going to be running another one of those to pick up any changes that have been made, but I expect to have very nearly 100% of Tillman unless things change dramatically. So we're just getting a lot of potential of appearing in the optimal lineup, almost double most of the other guys in the field. 0.96 fantasy point per minute producer. If he's getting 26 minutes in that starting lineup, I really don't care if he's playing next to Jonas Valanciunas, so it might bring down his rebound percentage overall. The minutes are what matters for him. So he's got a very good opportunity to put up a nice fantasy score here. Some of the other guys, it's a little bit of a question of, do we want to go to Desmond Bane, D'Anthony Melton, John Conchar, these various guys. I was looking at Conchar a little bit earlier in the day, just because he's very similar from a value perspective to Desmond Bane, who's getting owned at at this point, about triple the rate. So I think there's an argument to be made for going to Conchar at 3,500 dead minimum on FanDuel, 3,200 over on Draftkings. You get him as a point guard and a small forward on DK as well. I think there's a lot of advantage there, and just being able to move him around the board at that almost dead minimum price. On DK, he comes up in nearly 20% of the optimal line he comes up in the optimal lineup nearly 20% of the time in simulations. I have to start saying that right. So you're getting a massive leverage score on him, very strong value play. He could totally bust, but I think we pick up enough that it makes sense to get at least well over the field, which is pretty easy to do on him. The other guys are definitely in play, Bane and Melton, in terms of being good values and good plays. Bane not getting a ton of ownership either, not getting more ownership than his optimal rate either, but he is getting a lot of ownership in the heavy teens on FanDuel and into the 20s on DK.
All right, this is a terrifying thing. Now, the one nice thing we will may or may not get the starting lineup for Memphis, but the way the games are staggered tonight, we'll have time to react because we have the 8:30, an 8, and 8:30, and then 2 9:00 games. Sacramento, Chicago is the other one we're going to talk about here shortly. Phoenix and Memphis, and then we have Washington and Portland. Now, I would not want to skip out on the 8:00 game. I'm not really doing cartwheels over the 8:30 game tonight, so I'm guessing I'll probably have a smattering of players in there, but I'll be able to tweak and adjust my lineups depending on what we do find out, if anything firms up there with Memphis and or Phoenix. Someone had mentioned in chat something about Chris Paul maybe not playing tonight. I haven't heard anything about that. Did you see that they're like 28-point roll or score reversal they put up in the third quarter on New Orleans in their last game? Paul was plus 28 and he played 10 minutes in the fourth quarter. He's unbelievable.
And he is still so good.
Yeah.
I missed. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to pour over box scores for that one, but that's impressive. I mean, he's just so good. If he doesn't go tonight, which I hadn't seen, and I'm
just checking his minutes right now. I mean, it is a back-to-back. He played 31 minutes. That's actually less than what he's playing on the year by a couple minutes. So I'm not thinking it is. We have heard nothing about this. If he's out, then yes, Devin Booker, all the Devin.
Yeah,
Booker.
that's where I was getting to.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. That's it exactly. You could maybe see like Cam Johnson come up a little bit, or some of these random guys. But yeah, that would just be all about Devin Booker. That's where I would go with that. The other Phoenix guys on the boards, I could get a little bit of Jay Crowder just because I get the guys who don't have to score the ball to come up, and he's coming up a little bit optimal on Fanduel, not very much at all on Draftkings for 5,200. Mikal Bridges, somewhat similar. I just don't like the player as much, really, and I don't want to pay for him at the small forward spot. He'll be in that mix of guys, like I said, behind Hayward lining up after LeBron. So I'll get to some of them, but not a lot. I think Ayton maybe a little bit interesting, just given the the replacement type players in the front court from Memphis, other than Joval. So I could argue getting to Ayton and that massive rebounding upside. 6,600 on FanDuel, 6,800 on DK. He's in the center rotation a little bit.
Do you have point spreads up? I'm calling them up right now.
Not current, but I could get there quick enough.
I'll have it in just a sec here. So I just want
to Odd Shopper.
I'm going to go there in just a sec. The Memphis line here. So Phoenix is favored by 6.5 because just as a thought exercise, I wanted to see, because I'm going to the NBA standings page as well, and then the team schedules. So just as a thought exercise to see what might happen here. And this is something we can be prepared for. And we have just a moment here. We have 31 minutes until we lock. We're doing another 30 minutes afterwards for Superdraft. Definitely check those guys out. It's at superdraft.io. You can download their app in the App Store. It is no salary caps. It's multipliers. We'll talk about that later, but you can literally play anybody you want. Say hello to lineup freedom with Superdraft. Awesemo21, that's Awesemo21 is the promo code that will get you $50 with your first deposit if you put in up to $50. So here's the schedule for Phoenix. So they play obviously tonight, Saturday. They play Monday at home against Portland. They play Wednesday against Charlotte. They play Friday against Chicago, and then next Sunday they're in Minnesota. So the only games I'm going to call tough would be Monday against Portland. Not too worried about that. And then next Tuesday in Los Angeles. So I was just trying to see, do they have some big games coming up? What are we doing? Would it be worthwhile for them to start looking for a spot for Paul to get rest? I don't think so, because some of those games are bound to be runaways. He could get some slate or in-game rest there. We're not that far away from the All-Star break as well. Why they're having a game is beyond me. Let's not allow traded players to join their teams for a certain number of days, but let's have all the key players from the good teams come together and then go back to their teams days later.
Yeah. Looking forward to Value Week 2 weeks later. It's going to be just all like $4,600 guys. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So Portland Phoenix is tied with Portland, 18-10. Dame Lillard has just been carrying Portland. They've won 6 of the last 7 or 7 of their last 8. It's just been phenomenal. I don't think he's going to keep that up.
Hit his stride too.
But there are 5 teams within 3.5 games from them. So point being here, I'm trying to see, do they have a cushion? Can they start resting players? No. Do they have an easier schedule coming up? Yes. But the fact that Memphis is putting everybody on the bench tonight with resting 3 guys and having 2 out for injury, maybe we get a surprise sit. It would not shock me if we don't see him in the fourth quarter if they have a lead. But that's what we want to exercise through on this. Just kind of thinking of how it is. Harrison Barnes is out.
Yeah. That makes some sense.
And take us through Phoenix here too as well.
Yeah. Well, we did. We hit, I think, the high points on Phoenix, but we can definitely dive in as we talk about it. But I think it makes sense that maybe they'll sit him in the fourth quarter, assuming that they're well ahead of this scrubsy team. That could make some sense, but he's not a play we're getting to a massive amount of the time anyway. I don't think on either site. So yeah, if you want to shave it down by a couple of minutes, then it would take him off the board even more. If he mixed into a few of my lineups, it's just not something I'm going to be really speculating on. I like to do those things with real news. There's enough question marks that I don't need to build in my own. So I would get him just kind of where I got him. And if we get a surprise scratch, we'll deal with it. But it makes some sense. It's one of the better spots, but to your point, I think a couple of those could be track meets. They won't be the most grueling, like competitive games. They'll just be running up and down the floor scoring against Portland and against Charlotte probably. So I think you could work in a little bit of rest for him in those. And does it really, like, does getting him rest on the Saturday, a week and change before a Tuesday game next week, not this coming week, but the week after, really have that much of an impact where, I'm not going to sweat it. But yeah, that Lakers would be the one where you want a fresh Chris Paul. Outside of that, like we said, if you get Paul sitting, smash the Devin Booker button. That's going to really vault him up, and he's going to be a fantastic play with not that many people on him. Other than him, small shares of Crowder, Bridges, Ayton are fine. Would not want any Frank Kaminsky, I don't think, and nobody really beyond that. Cam Johnson would come up a little bit maybe if Chris Paul sits.
All right, this is for Tyler and Terry. Guess what? And thank you. I missed who pointed that out. Superdraft is actually starting at 8 o'clock. When I went and looked this morning, not just our schedule, but I always go look at Superdraft to see for sure when they start, because I write up the DFS building blocks article and I go across all the main sites and I tell you what their slates are, because, while we write Yahoo centric and Yahoo player of the day, and hey, we're actually hosted over there with that article on Yahoo, which is helping keep it free. But I always want to make sure, because sometimes they'll move their start time around. If there's an early island game and then a half hour or even an hour between them, they'll go with the later slate too, because they want people to come over and play on their site. You are correct. When I looked earlier today, it said 4 games and it said 8:30. I didn't click on any contest, but they are locking in 25 minutes. We will get to them. We'll allow some time for that for sure to get there, probably our last 15 minutes. So we, with a quickness, are going to be working our way through these next couple games, but we'll start to look at our analysis for the next 2 with a look at Superdraft, because it is important that we do talk about our sponsor of our show. So they're over there at superdraft.io. They're running a $40,000 contest tonight, $15 entry fee, 93 max. Right now, they're looking for another 1,800 spots to fill into that. Their $4 contest has a 130 max, $2,000 to first. They're looking for 2,100 people to jump into that one. And then their and one is the $1 contest. That has 1,000 spots left. That is a fun contest. That's the one I usually play in. But we'll move on to some of these other games here, Terry, since we just learned that little tidbit. Harrison Barnes will be out. Glenn Robinson III will be out. Rashawn Holmes is going to try to warm up and see how he feels. Game time decision, and this is from the coach, there is a chance he plays. Hey, guess what? If you're a game time decision, there better be a chance you play, because otherwise you're not a game time decision. Coach speak! That's going to be the end of me here. All right. So knowing that, this is a phenomenal matchup. 2 teams that don't like defense. They're allergic to it, violently allergic to it, actually. And they both play kind of fast. The Aaron Fox, I think, is a good play. Zach Attack is a good play. I don't really know who else I am doing cartwheels over. What do you like from either side of these? And I'm going to call up the Superdraft projections here.
Cool. Yeah. So you mentioned the 2 guys at the top of the board for me for sure would be on either side, Zach LaVine and Darren Fox. I think Tyrese Halliburton's also on the board. I know Spags went into Buddy Hield and Greg went into Buddy Hield and his age and everything. Never a player I like to roster. I agree with everything they said. The guy's a surprising 28 and a half, 29 years old, and seems washed up at this point. He is coming up on the board a little bit in terms of Alex's numbers, and the public is not quite there. So I'll probably end up around the field somewhere like that, and then maybe squeeze over once I do the sorting process. I don't love it, but you get a little bit of improvement in all of these guys with Barnes not there. So we get that. If Holmes doesn't go, then we get the uptick in good old Whiteside, and we have to deal with that nonsense. Never guys I like speculating on the minutes. Again, like I said, I like to make decisions based on firm news. So if we get it with enough time to make pivots late where we see Whiteside going to be in there for 24 minutes, we know what he can do in a points per minute perspective, 1.33 fantasy points per minute. So if we don't have Holmes, we could go to that. Game time decision means a post-lock decision for us, most likely here. So that would be the Sacramento side. For me, I want to get to a good amount of De'Aaron Fox on this. I think he looks really strong. You mentioned everything about the matchup. His price is down. He's only 8,100 on FanDuel, 8,000 on DK. So that's a big drop. He's a guy who should be in the high $8,000 to $9,000 range, in my opinion. I think he's a better basketball player than this. So I'll definitely take some De'Aaron Fox. And I think for the money, Tyrese Halliburton is probably underpriced as well for his ability and for the role that he's going to have tonight. I think we can get to a lot of him too. So definitely give me those guys. And then from the other side of things, it's just going to be pretty much Zach LaVine and then mixing and matching the rest of these guys through the lineups. I'll get to some shares with Kobe White, a little bit of Pat Williams. That was a guy who I think is not going to come up for me at all. I know people were getting to him a little bit earlier in the year. He performed a few times, and then the salary caught up to him, and he just really hasn't been relevant since. 6,500 on FanDuel at the power forward. There's many other plays I like a lot better than that. 6,000 on DK, power forward and center. Same story. 1.9% of our simulations is where you're getting them in optimal lineups on DK. 2.8 on FanDuel. He's just not on the board. So for me, it's really not going to be anything in the front court. I'm going to be going to the back court a little bit around LaVine and Kobe White.
As long as it is the simulation that we are currently in, I'm okay with it. Speaking of that simulation, we have free player projections. I'm dropping that link into the YouTube chat. That also has our Superdraft player projections. Again, they do have their unique multiplier system. Basically, the better NBA player and fantasy player you are, the lower your multiplier is, the worse off or farther down the bench or rotation you are, the higher the multiplier is. That's what keeps the players relatively equal from a production standpoint. And from there, you really can see some players stand out when different things happen to change things up. So someone like Russell Westbrook, because he's been playing, not playing in games, he tends to see a little bit more of a multiplier than, say, his running mate, Bradley Beal, in these situations. Sometimes some of the Bradley Beal's at a 1 tonight. We're projecting him for about 47 Superdraft points. So that means he's coming in about 25th or 30th amongst all of the players tonight. He's coming in a lot higher than that for me on the salary cap sites, but that's just one of the angles we have here for Superdraft. The two things I did want to point out here we do have, a nice 9 o'clock slate here with 3 games. People I want to point out, I think that Garrett Temple is a reasonably good play and salary relief for that later slate if you want to pivot away from some of the Memphis players. He has a solid baseline. He does a little bit of everything, and his upside exists in steals and points. This is the perfect environment for him. The guy I'm nervous about, now his ownership has come down, or his popularity has come down with all of the Memphis news, but it's Patrick Williams. So on that shorter slate, I'm a little concerned with him. Main reason for him is, similar to KCP, he's averaging just under 0.7 fantasy points per minute. He's having a decent rookie here, but his usage rate is 16%. Remember, average is 20. His rebound rate is 10%. His assist rate is 5.4. That indicates the majority of his fantasy points are coming from points and or steals and blocks. That's a tough way to go about it. What was my other one that was a little bit stark here? So he has fallen below, or he's put up 20 or less FanDuel points in 7 of his last 12. He needs 23.5 or more to beat his boom score. And he hasn't done that in 7 of the last 12 games. So just putting that out there for a cheapie. On to our night slate. Literally everybody is in play. Damian Lillard, absolutely phenomenal. Terry, I'm going to give you a second here to calibrate your lineups while I talk through this, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you. We're doing a little Thanksgiving table pass to the left, everybody. Everybody's going to get a scoop of something here. Damian Lillard, I think, is probably my number 1 play across the board tonight. Even including salary, this is an excellent spot for him. He has said many times in interviews that he loves going against Russell Westbrook and the vice versa. They had 4 times a year where they got to go against each other just in the regular season when they were both in the Western Conference. This will be the second final time they face each other this year, unless somehow these two teams make it to the NBA Finals. Unlikely, I would be doing cartwheels, but unlikely. But without CJ McCollum over the last month, Damian Lillard is averaging 1.42 FanDuel points per minute. Yusuf Nurkic still out. Lillard is consistently seeing 36 to 38 minutes in this stretch. The Blazers have won 7 of 8 since they last played Washington. In that game, the teams combined for, 132-121 was the final score. Tonight, I saw it ticking up just before we went on the show. It was a 242.5 over under. I see someone asking about Russell Westbrook. Yes, I think he is a very fine play. Looking ahead, we always want to make sure what's he going to do. He has played on one consecutive set of days here. I don't know what's going to happen, but his next game's in Los Angeles, and he is, a UCLA guy. So he plays tonight, and then he plays Monday and Tuesday on the Los Angeles back-to-back. But he's very much in play tonight. His price is a little tenuous on DraftKings at $10,000, but Memphis is going to make it so we can play whomever we want. I love him at 41 on Yahoo, and he's perfectly fine at $9,200 on FanDuel. Back-to-back triple doubles, and he would have had 2 more, but he missed each one by a rebound. He's perfectly fine. And then Enes Kanter is my play of the day on Yahoo. He is $26 there. He's okay on DraftKings and FanDuel at $6,900 and $6,200. He should be a lock for a double-double. 2020 is in play. I think he's going to be more like 15-15 for tonight. Is that going to do it for us on DraftKings? We'll see. But again, Memphis has made it, so salary cap really doesn't count. And then, of course, you have the amazing Bradley Beal. What would you like to add for this game here?
Boy, that was dynamite. Man, you covered a lot, and I got a lot done while you were talking.
Perfect.
So,
my turn.
dropping this last little thing into my model here, and I should get my new minutes and all of that. We should be in business. So, yeah, I'm with you on most of that. I definitely will be getting to Enes Kanter at the center spot. I know you said he was a little bit less shiny maybe as we come over to the salary-based sites. I definitely want to get to him on FanDuel. I think he's coming up a decent amount. He's publicly owned, and he's got a negative leverage score, but I think he sets himself apart from the other centers that are available on the slate in such a way that it makes a lot of sense to just consider him good chalk and kind of a fundamental building block on FanDuel. 6,200 for the potential game that he's got in front of him tonight. I never like to get too very, specific matchup. I like to go with the rates and, the averages all, in general. But in this spot, I expect there to be a significant number of shots and a significant number of missed shots. And there is just an immense rebounding opportunity for a very, very good rebounder here. So like you said, 2020 is in play. I want a piece of that for 6,200 if he does go there. Gary Trent, very much in play for me as an option on FanDuel at the shooting guard spot. It's a spot where we can mix and match some of those value guys. Like him a little less on DK where he's 6,000, but you do get him at the point guard spot, so you can move him around a little bit. So I don't hate it there. And then, of course, Dame Lillard, I think is a no-brainer on both sites. He's coming up in a massive amount of my lineups. He's looked good at the top of the board all day long. You mentioned, the role that he's had since CJ McCollum went out. And we've talked about it on a few different shows as he's kind of hit his stride. He wasn't necessarily getting to where we expected him to be, but he's kind of there now. He hasn't necessarily put up that one 80-point game or anything like that, but he's definitely hit, exactly where we want. We've seen all the rates come up for him. So I want to get to Damian Lillard and as frequently as possible, pretty much until CJ's back or until that price climbs and really matches where he should be. Still under 10K on FanDuel, which I really like. So definitely can get to that. On the other side, I was getting a good amount of Russ Westbrook. I think he makes sense as a good pivot from Steph Curry in terms of putting somebody next to LaMelo Ball at the point guard spot. But I want to get to De'Aaron Fox at that spot as well. Get to a little bit of John Moran at that spot as well. So I'll have a bit of a mixed bag at that at the point guard spot, rotating through most of those pay-up options. But Dame and Westbrook are both very much on that board. Beal coming up significantly for me, but shooting guard wasn't really a spend-up target in terms of where it was landing, how these things just shook out for me when the optimals came together, or the potential optimals came together. So I'm getting to him less, but I really like him, if that makes sense. I just love the player. I love the upside. 9,700. He's fairly priced, and the public will be there, which is probably what's forcing him out of some of my lineups. On DK, he only comes up 11.2% of the time in the optimal lineup. 9,900 over there, which is a higher price, by just in terms of site to site. So I could see getting away from it more on DraftKings, where I like him a little bit more on FanDuel, 22% of the time coming up in the optimal over there. I do not trust anyone else on the offense, on the Washington side. We've seen guys step into the offense and have a big game like Davis Bertans, but he had to hit,
like 8 of 9? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He needs to repeat that performance to do anything, as do most of these guys. So they're role players. They're replacement level guys right now. I don't trust any of them. I like Rui Hachimura as a player. I think he could get stuff done, but he's not a guy I'm going to. I won't push him out, but I only want him 5% of the time around what the public would have him.
All right, I'm just going through here. Let's see. Reminder: Superdraft locking in 13 minutes. That was a change from earlier today. Thank you for pointing that out to chat. Dropping in the free super chat. Free Superdraft projections as well as all projections for players. Get us up to 700 likes. I am now going to give you guys the ownership here. We just had one hot off the press. Do you like Gary Trent or Halliburton tonight? I would lean a little bit towards Trent. He's a little bit more expensive, but I think a little steadier of an option.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think we've got him for a pretty significantly bigger minutes distribution, although I haven't seen side by side since we got the Barnes news. So that might come up. Let me pull it up, actually. That's worth checking as I'm talking about it.
While you're looking at that, in the interest of time, we've got DK, Xavier Tillman, 45%, LeBron James, 31, De'Aaron Fox, 28, Desmond Bane, 27, Enes Kanter, 27, Damian Lillard, 26, Zach Attack, 22, Andrew Wiggins, 22. Look at that. I'm giving you bonus time. Hit that like button. Come on. It's not money time. It's bonus time with your old pal Emac. FanDuel, number one player, 40%, Enes Kanter, 37, Damian Lillard, Xavier Tillman back in our lives at 35, LeBron, 34, LaMelo Ball, 31, Gordon Hayward ticks up to 29, De'Aaron Fox at 24. At Yahoo, you were looking at Tillman at 46, Kanter at 40, Lillard at 31, LeBron at 28, DeAndre Ayton at 28, and De'Aaron Fox at 26. Beal versus Zach Attack in the GPP. That's very close. If you can do anything that you really like with that $800 on DraftKings, I think that's about what it is. Go with Zach. But my heart is with the Wizards tonight. So 52-48. And I'm trying to stay up to watch that game tonight.
Yeah, you can play them both on both sites if you really wanted to. If you're deciding between the two, I agree with that. If you can get away with something really significant by that salary difference on DraftKings, definitely make that move. And actually, just going by Alex's board on DK, you're getting Fox a pretty significant amount of the time more often in simulations in the optimal lineup than you are Bradley Beal. So I think that might be a Fox for me. If I was going on the DK side, a lot closer on FanDuel. You're getting different positions, of course, but if it came down to a salary decision, who do I play, this guy or that guy? I think I would probably just take the salary and a tiny little bit of ownership savings on and go to De'Aaron Fox and find another shooting guard. But I've mentioned a few times shooting guard not coming up as a spendy kind of spot for me on FanDuel tonight. And then going back to the other question, Tyrese Halliburton or Gary Trent Jr., we do still have, even after the Harrison Barnes news, Halliburton's minutes jumped to 31.2 in Alex's projections. But we've got Gary Trent seeing about 4 and change more minutes than that. Their rates are different. 0.95 fantasy points per minute for Halliburton, 0.73 for Gary Trent. So that evens out pretty well. They're getting projected right around the same on both sites by Alex based on that. Those rates at those minute projections come out just about even. In terms of ownership, they're both right there. I think you can squeeze a little bit more, maybe just because Tyrese Halliburton is more buzzy and Gary Trent is more playing Gary Trent. Okay, kind of an option. So maybe just on that, get a little leverage and go to Gary Trent. But I like, as a player in a vacuum, I like Tyrese Halliburton quite a bit better.
All right. If you were going to choose on FanDuel, the blue site, Butler, Temple, and Ayton, or Hayward, Oubre, and Kanter, I would go with the second.
The second one for sure. Hayward,
even though
Oubre,
Kanter may only get 1 or 2 blocks, I would still go with the second.
Yeah, I think there's so much more upside in that second one for Kanter. And then Hayward was ranking out above Jimmy Butler on the board all day long in terms of all those metrics we look at. Boom score probability, optimal lineup appearance rate from Alex's board. Was hitting his target score more frequently for me. It's just a better play. Like I mentioned with Butler when we talked about him, he's a great player. He is at his correct salary, though. That's the problem. If he was mispriced, we'd be gaining an advantage. We'd be gaining something out of it. Rostering him just at who he is kind of a price when he's going to be owned by the public, you're not getting a leg up on anything. So he's fine, but I think we get a significant leg up by rostering Hayward and going to that spot and then gaining with Cantor and all of that.
How much Xavier Tillman are you going with?
I'll let you know for sure after I get these lineups into Excel, but it's going to be something like 90%, I would imagine.
Oh, it's going to be that high. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be super, super high.
All right. Speaking of super high, we got Superdraft. They are looking at 1,400 spots left in their main contest, 1,500 spots in their $4 contest. Their $1 could come close to filling their single entry stuff, their double doubles, the quarters. The smaller contest they are not going to fill. They are barely going to rake, is my guess, in the next 7 minutes. Reminder, I did drop in that free projections. We have free projections for all sites today, but Superdraft is at the top. Our number one play is Russell Westbrook with a 1.2 multiplier. Number 2 is LeBron, 1.05, Damian, 1.05, Zach, 1.2, and this is where you can see the multiplier come into play. And his Cantor is 3 points behind those guys with his 1.45 multiplier, and Draymond Green tied within his Cantor with his 1.55 multiplier. These are where things get a little wacky. You can start to see Jimmy Butler becomes a little bit better of a play here. He's 8 points behind the rest of those guys with a 1.2 multiplier. Curry falls down the list. He does not have a multiplier tonight. He gets what he gets. So he is looks like about the 12th or 14th best play. Kobe White is ahead of him. When would Kobe White ever be ahead of Steph Curry? Well, on Superdraft he would, because he gets 60% of his fantasy points added back to his total.
Yeah, but with a play like LeBron looks tonight on the slate, that's significant that Steph only has a flat multiplier where LeBron actually has a multiplier on his points. That would knock Steph completely out of contention for me in terms of how to put these lineups together. I mean, not completely across 150 lineups, but if I was making one, that would take him off the board pretty significantly. That's surprising. Well, I guess not surprising. I guess it's more surprising that LeBron has a multiplier than it is that Steph doesn't. And somebody out there asked in Slack if we had any suggestions for Fantasy Cruncher for Superdraft. Unfortunately, I don't. I haven't crunched lineups for Superdraft. When I've played over there, I've just done some hand building and kind of the way I do it on the slate. Have you crunched lineups for Superdraft?
I have not today. It's a different mix. You're going to want to practice with their CSV upload. It's a little bit different than the other sites, but I will tell you this. Don't repeat it. A little birdie has mentioned that we may be seeing some Alex Baker giving a Superdraft specific show potentially on Monday. Don't hold me to it, but you guys are here on a Saturday night, and this is the stuff you're going to get. So I do want to mention that is.
I tell you what, I'll definitely make a point to just get into Fantasy Cruncher and mess around with some Superdraft lineups for you guys, and I'll have some thoughts on that. Tune in next Saturday for this same show, and I'll have some thoughts on it.
So give everybody a little hint as to what you did today behind the paywall.
Behind the paywall. Oh, that was fun. I did a show called our Game Plan Show that is hosted by Mr. Alex Baker most weekdays. And then we get some of the other top end guys during the week to fill in for Alex when he doesn't do it. And then you get me on Saturdays. So I love jumping into that show. It's a one-on-one kind of a thing behind the paywall where people get to kind of hang out and ask some questions. My goal today was going in. I don't know if you got to catch the show. I wanted to go into Late Swaptimizer and show everybody really a nice little dive into how to use Late Swaptimizer and talk all about that. Unfortunately, the app didn't quite cooperate with me, so I didn't get to do that. So we pivoted into just taking a look at some lineups and really digging into some slate-specific constructions and getting into just how I use the tools and how I think about the slate. So you're getting a user perspective, and I try not to really look too much at the slate beforehand so that I don't know a lot of the plays that are coming up. And you can kind of see just how I start my day and how I analyze the slate through that. And then we actually used our lineup builder tool from the site to build a lineup. So what I'm going to do as far as Late Swaptimizer, since I realize it's not the easiest thing in the world to cue Fantasy Cruncher up to let me demonstrate what we need to do with it while there's not a slate going on. I'm going to pick a slate this week that has a potential to have some breaking news between. That's not good. It has the potential to have some breaking news between lock and like 9 o'clock. And I'm going to jump on live and do a special little demonstration. And with that, can you take over talking? Because something happened with my Fanduel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to hit submit on my lineups here. You can see that things go a little crazy here, but this is why we have practiced our fire drills countless times. I have set up my lineup so I have nobody going after in this first game. So if mine were to fail, I would be able to live to fight another day. There's nothing wrong with that. I would miss out on a few of the plays like Curry and Ball and a couple others, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. I would have a moment to regroup and get back in and see what I'm coming in here. So we didn't end up getting that Memphis news as best I can tell. Let me call up my news god screen here and see what's going on with that. But that is what we'll want to look at. Starting lineup here for Golden State is as expected. It's Juan Toscano Anderson. That's going to be in there with Green, Wiggins, Oubre Jr., and Curry. Let's see.
Buddy JT Anderson.
So if Holmes can't play, it's going to be Corey Joseph who starts for Barnes. If Holmes can play, it's going to be Joseph. If Holmes cannot play, they don't know what they're going to do yet with Sacramento, but we should have that. Bagley, they are expecting to play in the 24 to 28 minute range. For what it's worth, most of this year when he was at full health, he was playing about 28 minutes for perspective there, and you're missing out on some fourth quarter run. Let's see if we have any other questions. We're down to about 90 seconds to go here. Let's see. We will.
Okay, I'm back. I'm good.
All right. I think that's rolling most of our stuff here. Yeah, the Superdraft, that was a little bit of a surprise. Apologies. That was not intended. But I half wonder if between the postponed Texas games, somehow there was a miscommunication on their end where we lost our 7 o'clock games and it pushed everything back from that standpoint. But just want to say, they do have late swap over there. Their contests are going to be only 80% full tonight, including their flagship contest. Looks like it, depending on what happens in the next 90 seconds, is going to be closer to 70% full. Nice. That is like them paying you to play on it with rake back.
So, hey, I'm basically, to answer the question from before, I'm 75% Tillman. So he did come down a little bit more than I thought he would. Probably the ownership pushed up a little bit more. My top guys, Tillman and LeBron, right where I expected to be. 75% each of those guys. I ended up with a lot more Tyrese Halliburton than I expected. So he popped as a value play at the shooting guard spot. So he's going to be in a lot of my lineups, getting to a ton of LaMelo like I expected. Cantor, Lillard, Hayward, Fox, all the guys I talked about. Somebody just popped up. Apologies, I didn't see who it was. But yeah, I wouldn't really sweat playing Fox and Halliburton side by side in this one. I think there's a low enough price on Halliburton and a good enough price that's come down on Fox where you can get away with that. I think there's enough run for both of them there. And I'm sure I'll be having it just based on these distributions. So I hope it works out well.
All right. So I'm going to have to go back and fix a bunch of stuff because somehow I did not get any Ja Morant in my lineups in that little scramble there. But I did go 80% Tillman, 60% Lillard, 40% Westbrook, 40% James, 40% De'Aaron Fox, Desmond Baines at 40, Cantor at 36, Beal at 31, Draymond locking in at 25 there. Curry, I only ended up with 14. That's going to actually end up being below the field, but I like all those other guards at the top. Equal and opposite reaction for everything that's out there. Newton's third law. Got to remember that one. Just 14% Alex Caruso. I would have thought I would get higher on that. I'm okay with it. We'll play around a little bit more with these since we do have 30 minutes until the next game. And anything else you want to mention here, Terry?
Yeah, just since you mentioned him, I'm just trying to figure out where I am on Draymond. Yeah, I wasn't getting much Draymond. I didn't get I'm only around 10-ish%. So that's an interesting one for me on this slate. He was getting around 20% ownership on FanDuel, and I was getting not quite where he needed to be in terms of the target score I needed him to hit. I think he needs to give us around 51 points, something like that, to win the slate tonight. I don't know that he gets there. I've only gotten him getting there around 4% of the time, with Alex's number around 4% of the time also. So he didn't come up a lot for me. That was the only spot we had significant difference.
All right. For those of you still around, we appreciate you sticking on. That's very helpful. Reminder, we do have a whole bunch of content going off tomorrow. starting on, oops, what did I write the wrong day? No, I did not, because 10 a.m. we have the NBA strategy show. We're starting those back up 4 Sundays now. That's going to be Laffy and Josh. But I pulled the wrong schedule there for the rest of it. So let me get that up. And then reminder, we do have a lot of betting content now that is available across the different states. You can check that out at Odds Shopper. That's an Awesemo sister site, as well as Awesemo Odds. And that's where you'll find a ton of free betting content, basic evergreen strategies on how to do things, bets of the day, props of the day, and the booster bets. The vast majority of these larger online gaming companies are putting out booster bets, which means they'll say, hey, instead of 100 plus 150 for LeBron and James Harden to both get a triple double, we'll make it plus 300. They'll cap you out at $25, but then you win 75 if it comes through, right? So those are the kind of fun bets that they put out there, and that's so you can dip your toe in there. You can sign up through any of those links. It helps us if you come in through our links on the Awesemo Odd Shopper page. We appreciate that. That's what's going to keep all this content free, and we've got a whole lot more coming, but that is going to be a revenue source for us because we'll get referral fees on you guys. No changes there on that, but they don't do pure referrals here at the betting site. So if you pick something off Twitter, the betting company gets it. If you pick something off Awesemo Odd Shopper and come in through our links, we get the little piece of that. You're going to get the same bet, the same deal. The other thing we do is we make sure all of the best deals are the ones that are showing up for you in your specific state, geolocated. That is a big thing.
That's
that we
really
put
cool,
in behind the scenes too. From that standpoint. So 10 a.m. we have the strategy show with Laffy and Josh. At 2 o'clock we have NASCAR live before lock with Jason and Chris. 5 o'clock tomorrow we've got the NBA deeper dive. That is with Laffy and Terry, and then it will be myself and Eric Lindquist taking you up to lock starting at 6 o'clock. 7 o'clock lock. It'll be a lot of fun tomorrow. Let's enjoy ourselves. With that, you can follow Terry over on Twitter at DigitalB21. I am at EmacDFS. It is Awesemo_COM. Hat tip to Tyler Zander, our phenomenal producer behind the glass. With that, gamers, good luck.